Story 1. My cousins refuse to pay their share of the family debt, but when they take their case to court, they discover that the debt had been transferred to their names without them knowing. It all started a few years ago when my grandfather passed away. So you understand the magnitude of this. My grandparents were those people who seemed to have everything under control. They had a beautiful house, savings, family businesses, but what nobody knew was that behind that facade there was a mountain of debt. When my grandfather died, letters from the banks began to arrive, lawyers knocking on the door, and reminders of overdue debts. Well, my grandmother was devastated and had no idea how to handle anything. That's when the family got together to make a decision. We were the main beneficiaries of the will, my cousins, 3 in total, and I, because my parents died when I was younger. So, in theory, the responsibility of settling the debts fell on us, with a verbal agreement in which we all committed to dividing the amount proportionally. The plan was simple. Each of us would assume our part, and over time we would pay it together. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, no. I was the only one who actually started paying from the first month. I took my share of the debt and started negotiating with the banks. I canceled overdue cards, paid interest, and took on a responsibility that, honestly, it was not my job to carry alone. Meanwhile, my dear cousins decided that their priorities were different. Over these years, I have seen how one of them bought a new car because he deserved it after so much work that, according to him, was not enough to pay his share of the debt. Another of my cousins moved to an expensive apartment in one of the most exclusive areas of the city. And the third, well, he simply lives to show off on Instagram, vacations, designer clothes, new gadgets every 3 months. I have talked to them. I have begged them. I have sent them detailed emails with numbers, dates, and calculations so that they understand how much it is costing me to cover their irresponsibility. And what have I received in return? Mockery, excuses. My older cousin even told me once, "It's just that you have always been too responsible. You know I don't work that way." And the worst thing of all is that nobody in the family wants to intervene. My uncles, their parents, say that they do not want problems, that we are family, and that we should not be fighting over money. My grandmother doesn't even understand what's going on and says she doesn't want to see me fighting with my cousins because that would have saddened my grandfather. Meanwhile, I am drowning. I work endless hours just to keep up with the payments, and there are months when I literally have nothing left after covering the debt. Nothing, not even for myself. My friends tell me that I should cut ties with them, but I cannot. It is more complicated than that. So here I am seriously considering taking this to court. Because if they are not going to pay their share voluntarily, maybe the law will force them to. Although, being honest, the idea of having to sue my own family breaks my heart. Update 1. I could no longer carry this debt as if it were only mine. So I talked to them again. I planned it carefully. I wrote them a group message asking them to meet, without beating around the bush. I made it clear that it was to talk exclusively about the debt. I made sure to be almost cold so that they would not have the excuse that I was attacking them. After several excuses, "I can't this weekend, I'm very busy," or "We can talk later, I'm very busy at work," I managed to get us together at my grandmother's house. That day, I arrived early with all the necessary documents, bank statements, family agreements, even the original letters from the banks that detailed the debt, all organized and ready to present my case. They arrived late, as always, with the attitude that they were making a sacrifice by attending. The meeting started badly from the beginning. As soon as I started explaining the numbers, they were already looking at their phones or crossing their arms as if they were bored. The older cousin, who is the most cynical of the 3, literally interrupted and said, "Look, I don't want to be rude, but what's the point of this? You have always been the one who worries about these things. Honestly, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect you." I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. I explained to them again that this was not optional. The debt is in the name of the 4 of us, and if they don't pay, they could face legal problems. I showed them the accumulated interest and explained that if we continue like this, the debt will continue to grow and it will be even more difficult to liquidate. My younger cousin, the one who is always on Instagram, didn't even try to hide his disinterest. "I don't have time for this. Besides, I don't even have debts." "You're handling that, right? Well, keep doing it." That phrase, "you're handling that," burned me. I reminded them that I had already paid almost half of my share and that at this point I was covering what they had ignored. And that's when the comment came out that made me lose the little patience I had left. Well, it's just that you have always been more, how to say it, responsible. I can't deal with these things. Responsible? Sure, I'm the responsible one, and they are the irresponsible ones, but that apparently gives them a free pass to avoid any consequence. I'm not going to lie, I raised my voice. I told them that I was not going to continue paying for their luxurious lives while I could barely buy the basics to live on. I reminded them that all this was legally their responsibility too, and that they could not simply ignore it. But instead of accepting what I said, they started to laugh. The older cousin said something like, "Look, if it bothers you so much, take us to court. See if you have luck with that." That was what I needed to hear. I left that meeting decided. I was not going to beg them anymore, and I was definitely not going to continue being their financial lifeline. The next day I looked for a lawyer. I had no idea where to start, but the lawyer I found was incredibly clear and direct. He explained to me that since we had all signed the initial agreement and the debt was in the name of the four of us, I had every right to take legal action. However, he also mentioned something interesting. There was a clause in the agreement that for some reason they had overlooked. Basically, if one or more heirs did not comply with their part, there was the option of transferring the debt proportionally to their name, as long as I could prove that I had made reasonable efforts to get them to pay. That clause was what gave me a ray of hope. I haven't told them anything yet. Part of me feels some guilt because this is going to escalate and probably break what little is left of our relationship. But at the same time, what other option do I have? They made it clear that they do not plan to pay, and I cannot continue sacrificing myself while they live without worries. The next thing I will do is start the process to transfer their share of the debt to their names. The lawyer told me that it is a slow but completely legal procedure, and if they decide to fight it in court, then I will be ready to present all the evidence. Update 2. A few weeks have passed since the last update, and things have moved faster than I expected. After that meeting in which my cousins mocked me and basically told me that they were never going to pay, I decided it was time to act. My lawyer, whom I will call Martin to protect his privacy, has been one of the few lights in this whole disaster. I will tell you what has happened so far. First, Martin reviewed each of the documents related to the debt, the family agreement we signed when my grandfather passed away, the bank notifications, the payment statements, and of course, the famous clause that I mentioned before. According to him, not only do I have a solid case, but my cousins, by signing the agreement without reading it, basically left me a door open to protect myself from their irresponsibility. The key is that the debt was registered in the name of all of us as heirs, but the bank and the creditors allow the payment to be handled flexibly. This means that while I was covering everything, the financial system assumed that I was doing it on behalf of the whole group. That gave me the right to request a proportional transfer of the debt to the names of the heirs who were not complying. I am not going to lie, when Martin explained this to me, I felt weird. I don't know if it was relief, contained rage, or something else. On the one hand, I finally felt that I had a real tool to defend myself. On the other, I knew that this decision was going to trigger a family war that I was honestly terrified to face. The first step was to document all my attempts to contact my cousins. Martin asked me to gather evidence of the times I sent them messages, emails, and calls asking them to pay their share. Luckily, I am one of those who keep everything, so I had screenshots, sent emails, and even voice notes where I literally told them how much they had to pay and by when. I also included the bank statements that showed the payments that I made and the total absence of payments from their side. When I handed all those documents to Martin, he looked at me and said something that still resonates in my head. This is not just a legal case. It's an example of how people abuse someone responsible. We are going to fix it. After that, the official process began. Basically, a request was sent to the bank and the creditors to formally transfer the unpaid parts of the debt to the names of my cousins. This involved legally notifying them of the change, something that, according to Martin, would probably unleash all kinds of reactions, from confusion to pure anger. The day the notifications were sent was strange. I didn't say anything to my cousins because honestly, I didn't want to face the drama directly. But a few days later the messages started. First, it was one of the younger cousins, the one who lives on Instagram. He wrote to me something like, "What is this about me receiving letters about a debt? Weren't you handling all that?" I didn't answer. Then came the older cousin, with whom I expected a more aggressive attack, and he did not disappoint me. His message said, "What kind of game are you playing? This is not going to stay like this, you hear me? I will talk to my lawyers. This is illegal. I ignored him too. The only one who did not contact me directly was the cousin who bought the new car. What I do know is that he ran to complain to his mother because my aunt called me hours later to ask me for explanations. That conversation was surreal. She basically told me that I was being cruel and that I should not treat the family like that. My response: cruel? Do you know what is cruel? Working like a donkey while your children buy luxuries and laugh at me. This is not cruelty, it is justice. She hung up after telling me that she would talk to the whole family to fix this. Apparently, my aunt was not very successful because a few days later my cousins decided to escalate the situation. I received an official letter informing me that they were filing a lawsuit against me. According to them, I am abusing the family agreement and acting fraudulently. The irony is so great that I almost laugh when reading it. Martin is not worried. He told me that this was predictable and that in fact it is the best thing that could have happened because now we can present all the evidence directly before a judge. The lawsuit is not an obstacle. It is an opportunity to demonstrate everything they have done, or rather, have not done, during these years. For now, I am following Martin's advice and preparing for what is coming. I am afraid. I will not deny it. But I also have something that I had not felt in a long time: hope. If this ends as I hope, I will finally be able to get rid of this burden and hopefully give my cousins the lesson they deserve. Update 3. If I thought things were already tense, what happened next took everything to the next level. My cousins not only went ahead with their lawsuit, but began a kind of campaign to make me look like the villain of the story. Before going into the legal details, let me tell you how they tried to drag me through the mud. First, they started posting indirect messages on social networks. Things like, "Some people do anything for money, even betray their family," or "How sad that greed can be more than family ties." They did not mention my name directly, but for anyone who knew our situation, even vaguely, it was clear that they were referring to me. I ignored it. Honestly, I have no time or energy to respond to nonsense on social networks. But what did bother me was that my aunt, the mother of the older cousin, began calling other relatives to paint me as a monster. According to what a distant cousin told me, she was saying that I had manipulated the legal documents to charge the debt to her children. She also said that I was trying to take everything they had out of envy. Seriously, envy of what? Of their cars, vacations, and gadgets while I could barely pay the rent? Please. While they were dedicated to this, my lawyer Martin was busy preparing our defense. The first hearing was quick, more a formality to present the case and the initial evidence. But the interesting thing happened later. When Martin began to break down the documents in front of the judge, first he presented the original agreement signed by all of us. There it was in black and white, the clause that specified that in case of noncompliance the debt could be transferred proportionally. The judge asked my cousin's lawyers to explain why they considered this fraudulent, since they themselves had signed that agreement. And do you know what their argument was? Our clients did not read the document carefully at the time. That was it. They were basically saying that their ignorance was a valid excuse. Martin could not help but smile a little when listening to that. Then he presented the evidence of the attempts I made to get them to pay, the messages, the emails, the meetings. He also showed the bank statements that proved that I had been paying religiously for years while they did not contribute a cent. The faces of my cousins during that part were priceless. I think they never imagined that I had saved so much evidence. But the best was when Martin pulled out the last ace up his sleeve, the posts on my cousins' social networks showing off their luxuries while the debt continued to grow. Yes, I asked a couple of friends to take screenshots of those publications before they deleted them. There were photos of new cars, vacations on paradisiacal beaches, dinners in expensive restaurants, all accompanied by comments such as, "Work hard, play harder," or "If you can't afford this lifestyle, what are you doing wrong?" Martin used those screenshots to demonstrate that not only could they pay the debt, but they had chosen to deliberately ignore it while leading an extravagant lifestyle. The judge seemed impressed. My cousin's lawyers tried to counterattack, saying that those publications did not prove anything concrete, that they were nothing more than a portrait of their personal lives. But then Martin raised a key question. If they had money for these activities, why did they not comply with their legal obligation to pay the family debt? Silence. The hearing ended with the judge requesting a more detailed review of my cousin's financial documents. This means that they will have to present their income, expenses, and assets to determine if they are really in a position to pay or if, as they say, they do not have money. Of course, that made them even more nervous. The interesting thing about all this is that when leaving the hearing, one of my cousins, the youngest, the one who lives on Instagram, tried to talk to me. He reached me in the parking lot and said something like, "Look, I don't know why you're doing all this. We could fix it between us. We don't need a judge to get involved in this." I looked at him and replied with all the calm in the world, "You had years to fix it with me, and you laughed in my face. Now it's too late." He remained silent, as if he did not know what to say. Then he blurted out, "You're going to regret it before leaving." For now, I am waiting for the next hearing where my cousin's financial details will be presented. Martine says we are in a very strong position, but that we should not be overconfident. All I know is that whatever happens, I do not intend to back down anymore. Update 4. The second hearing was honestly like watching a show in slow motion where everything exploded in their faces. I will tell you how everything unfolded because this part was crucial for the case and honestly a little cathartic for me. As I mentioned before, the judge ordered my cousins to present a complete breakdown of their finances, income, assets, and expenses. Apparently, none of them thought this would be a problem because they entered the hearing with that same arrogant attitude they always have, as if everything were under control. Well, that lasted exactly until the questions began. First, my cousin's lawyers tried to argue that the judge's order was invasive and that they did not have to reveal personal details of their finances. But the judge was not having any nonsense. He basically told them that if they wanted to prove that they could not pay the debt, it was their obligation to prove it. If they did not present the information, the court would assume that they had the means but were choosing not to pay. With that threat on the table, they had no choice but to give in. The older cousin was the first to be interrogated. He presented documents showing his monthly income, which was not small, but he also tried to argue that he had many expenses that prevented him from covering his share of the debt. Martine took the opportunity to dissect those expenses, and what a surprise. It turned out that most of them were not necessities, but luxuries. For example, payments for a high-end sports car, exclusive memberships in gyms and social clubs, frequent expenses in luxury restaurants and designer clothing stores. The judge looked at him and asked, "Do you mean to say that you can afford these things but cannot comply with a legal obligation that you signed voluntarily?" The older cousin began to stammer something about how he had not understood the agreement well and how he thought that I would take care of it, but the judge was not convinced. Then it was the turn of the younger cousin, the one who lives on Instagram. His statement was even worse. He tried to present himself as someone who could barely make ends meet. But Martine had the captures of his social networks ready to destroy that argument. When the judge saw the photos of his vacations in Europe, the new gadgets and the dinners in expensive restaurants, he asked him directly, "How do you justify these expenses if you allege that you do not have enough money?" My cousin's response was literally this, "Well, I paid for those things with my credit card. It's not that I have the money in cash." The judge let out a sigh as if he could not believe what he was hearing. Finally, the cousin who bought the expensive car tried to argue that his salary was not stable and that he had family responsibilities that absorbed most of his income. But then Martine presented documents showing that he had made a considerable down payment for a new car right after I had paid a large amount of the family debt. Basically, it was clear that he had simply decided to prioritize his whims instead of complying with his part. The final blow came when Martine presented a comparative analysis of my finances and those of my cousins. He showed how, despite earning less than them combined, I had managed to pay my share of the debt and cover a large part of theirs. The contrast was devastating for their case. When the hearing ended, the judge's position was clear. My cousins had the capacity to pay and had chosen not to do so. The judge ordered that the transfer of their share of the debt to their names be made effective immediately and that they assume any interest accumulated since the default began. He also imposed a fine on them for trying to delay the process with unfounded arguments. The faces of my cousins when hearing the verdict were something that I will never forget. It was a mixture of disbelief, anger, and for the first time, fear. They could no longer hide behind excuses or their arrogant attitude. Now the responsibility was completely theirs, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Of course, this did not end there. When leaving the hearing, my aunt confronted me again, this time shouting in front of everyone, "You are a traitor. How can you do this to your own family?" I replied with all the tranquility I could muster. I did nothing more than force them to comply with what they promised. If that is being a traitor, then I suppose I am. Now that the debt is officially in their names, I can finally breathe a little. I am not completely free yet because the banks still need to adjust the accounts, but at least I know that I am no longer carrying all the weight alone. However, my cousins are not going to give up so easily. They have hinted that they plan to appeal the decision, although Martine is confident that they have no legal basis to do so. Whatever happens, I am ready. Update final. I thought that after the last hearing things would start to calm down, but I could not have been more wrong. If anything was clear to me, it is that my cousins do not know how to accept defeat. Instead of assuming their responsibility, they decided to double the bet, and honestly what they did next ended up being their worst mistake. Shortly after the hearing, I started receiving strange messages from other family members. Some were neutral, asking me what was happening and if I had really ruined my cousins. Others, on the other hand, were directly hostile, calling me selfish, greedy, and even saying that I was destroying the family. All this had a strange tone, as if someone was deliberately fueling this narrative. It did not take long for me to find out the reason. My cousins and my aunt had been spreading lies about me, saying that I had falsified documents to charge them the debt, and that the judge had made a mistake in ruling in my favor. The worst thing was that they began to use their social networks to amplify this version. They published things like, "Justice is not always fair," or "Some prefer to trample on their family instead of working together." At first I limited myself to ignoring them, but then they began to send messages directly to my employer. Yes, you read that right. My cousins tried to get me in trouble at my job by insinuating that I was not a reliable person. I know this because my boss called me one day to ask me why he was receiving anonymous emails with vague accusations about my ethics and behavior. Fortunately, I have a good relationship with him and he did not believe any of that. But the situation made it clear to me that my cousins had crossed a very dangerous line. Martine recommended that I stay calm and record everything. So I started collecting screenshots, emails, and any proof that they were trying to defame me. I also asked my friends and close family members to do the same. I did not know exactly how I would use this information, but something told me that I would need it soon. Meanwhile, my cousins continued with their appeal, although as Martine said, they had no solid basis. Basically, their argument was that the clause in the family agreement was abusive and that I had acted in bad faith by transferring the debt. However, they did not present any new evidence, and the appeal was rejected almost immediately. This is where things got really interesting. After losing the appeal, my cousins started to panic. I received a message from the younger cousin, the one who lives on Instagram, asking me to talk in private. I ignored him because I no longer have any interest in dialoguing with them. A few days later, I received another message, this time from the older cousin, basically saying, "Look, this is getting out of hand. We can fix it without more problems if you withdraw." My answer was short and direct. There is no turning back. What came next was a desperate and frankly stupid attempt on the part of my cousins. They hired a lawyer, and I put quotes because he seemed more like a friend of theirs than a professional, who convinced them that they could prove that I had acted fraudulently. The strategy they used was to fabricate false evidence. Yes, you read that right. My cousins falsified documents to try to prove that I had manipulated the original agreement. I don't know if they thought it would be easy or if they were simply so desperate that they didn't care about taking the risk, but the result was disastrous for them. Martine discovered the inconsistencies almost immediately. The dates in the false documents did not match the original records, and the signatures had small differences that were obvious when compared to the authentic ones. But the best was when we presented evidence that one of the cousins, the one with the expensive car, had contacted an online service to create the false documents. The email with the request, including specific details of what he needed, was recovered by a computer expert hired by Martine. When we presented this in court, the reaction of my cousins was worthy of a movie. The younger cousin literally tried to deny everything, saying that he knew nothing and that it had been the older one's idea. The older one, for his part, tried to blame his mother, saying that she had insisted on looking for other options because she felt that they were being treated unfairly. It was a pathetic spectacle, and the judge had no patience with them. The result was overwhelming. In addition to maintaining the transfer of the debt to their names, the judge imposed an additional fine on them for presenting false evidence and ordered them to pay all the legal costs of the process, including my legal fees. He also left open the possibility of filing criminal charges for falsification of documents, although Martine advised me to wait before making that decision. When I left the court, I did not feel joy or immediate relief, only a deep weariness and a sense of disbelief at how far my cousins had gone to avoid facing their responsibilities. However, now I know that I finally have the advantage and that for the first time in years I can start thinking about a future without this constant burden. This has not completely ended, but my cousins have dug their own grave, and this time I do not intend to stop until I make sure that they face all the consequences of their actions. Story 2. My daughter rejects my help for her wedding because she thinks I am old-fashioned, but when her mother-in-law's plan fails, I refuse to help her and do not attend her wedding. I am going to be honest, I never thought I would be writing something like this. I always believed that I had a good relationship with my daughter, but it seems that a wedding can bring out the worst in people, especially when there are meddling mothers-in-law and ego problems involved. I do not know if I am looking for support, advice, or I simply need to get this off my chest, because right now I feel hurt and betrayed. My daughter, Clara, is 27 years old. She is my only daughter, and we have always been very close. When she was little, we used to have days of just us. We would go for ice cream, do crafts, or just talk about life. Although I did not always agree with her decisions, I always tried to support her in any way I could because, at the end of the day, she was my priority. When Clara told me that her boyfriend, Daniel, had proposed marriage to her, I was more than excited. Daniel always seemed like a good guy to me, maybe a bit reserved, but Clara loves him, and that is what matters most, right? At first, everything was going well. We were talking about possible locations for the ceremony, ideas for the decoration, and things like that. I even offered to help her with the costs, since I have some savings for important occasions like this. That was where things started to change. Shortly after getting engaged, Clara began to spend a lot of time with Daniel's mother, Patricia. Patricia comes from a wealthy family, and although she never said it directly, I always had the feeling that she looked down on me. I think that for her, I am too simple. I am not a millionaire, but I have worked hard all my life, and I am proud of what I have achieved. However, it seems that Patricia does not care about that. Suddenly, Clara began to distance herself a little. She no longer came to me for advice. Instead, Patricia was taking care of everything. They did not consult me for anything, not even for the small things like the colors of the flowers or the design of the invitations. When I asked Clara what was happening, she told me something that still hurts to remember. Mom, Patricia has more experience in this, and her ideas are more up-to-date. I do not want the wedding to look old-fashioned. Old-fashioned. I could not help but feel hurt. I have worked as an event organizer for years. It is not that I wanted to control everything, but I thought that at least my opinion would be valued. I try not to take it personally, but it was difficult. I told her that I understood and that I would be here if she needed me, but internally, I felt displaced. The worst part was when Patricia started making derogatory comments at a family gathering. While we were talking about the wedding, she mentioned that it would be a high-level celebration, as if insinuating that I was not used to that kind of event. Clara did not say anything. In fact, she seemed uncomfortable, but she did not correct her. It was at that moment when I realized that I no longer had an important role in my own daughter's wedding. I decided to take a step back and let Clara handle things her way, but honestly, I never imagined that this decision would lead to where we are now. Update 1. A few weeks have passed since my last post, and the situation, unfortunately, has not improved. In fact, I think it is going from bad to worse. As I mentioned before, I decided to take a step back and let Clara handle things as she wanted, even if that meant giving up all control to Patricia, her mother-in-law. But what I am seeing now is not simply my daughter organizing her wedding with someone else. It is as if she is being molded in the image and likeness of that woman. Let me explain. Patricia has taken absolute control, and I am not exaggerating. At first, I thought it was just a little enthusiasm on her part. After all, she is the mother of the groom, and mothers-in-law often want to get involved in these events. But this is something else. It is as if Patricia believed that this wedding was her personal project and not Clara and Daniel's special day. A few days ago, I found out that Patricia had decided to reduce the guest list from my side of the family. The wedding was going to be a big event, and Clara had talked about inviting several of our relatives and close friends, But apparently Patricia decided that some names did not fit with the vision she had for the wedding. And guess how I found out? Not by Clara, nor by Daniel. It was by a cousin of mine who called me worried because she had heard that she had not been included in the final list. When I confronted Clara, I tried to be as calm as possible. I asked her why she had not talked to me before making that decision. Her answer left me speechless. Mom, the list was already very long, and Patricia was right. We needed to make cuts. Besides, I thought it would not bother you so much. It would not bother me to leave out my own family, people who have been present in every important moment of her life. I felt invisible, as if my opinion no longer mattered at all. But the worst came after when I asked her why they had not cut more guests from Daniel's side. Clara avoided looking me in the eye and muttered something about his family also having important social commitments. Not only that, Patricia has also decided that the wedding will have a formal gala theme, something completely contrary to the relaxed and natural style that Clara had always imagined. I know this because she herself told me months ago before Patricia entered the scene. Clara wanted a wedding in a garden with wildflowers, warm lights, and a cozy atmosphere. But now it turns out that it will be in an extremely elegant event venue with minimalist decorations, glass tables, and a strictly black-tie dress code. I cannot help but wonder if my daughter is really happy with these decisions, or if she is simply being carried away by her mother-in-law's ideas. The last straw was a recent family gathering in which Patricia made a comment that still burns when I remember it. We were talking about the preparations, and someone mentioned that I had worked organizing events before. Patricia let out a giggle and said, "Oh yes, I was told." Although, of course, a wedding of this level is something very different from what she is used to. I felt like I was being hit in the chest. It was such a passive-aggressive comment that I almost could not react. I looked at Clara, expecting her to say something, to defend me from such blatant disrespect, but she did not. She just shrugged, as if she had not heard anything. After that meeting, I decided that I was not going to get involved again, not even emotionally. If Clara does not value my support or my presence, then I do not see why I should keep hurting myself with this. As much as it hurts me, I am going to stay on the sidelines. I know that many of you are probably thinking that I should talk to her more directly, or even with Daniel, but honestly, I do not know if it would do any good. It seems that at this moment, Patricia has all the influence, and Clara is not willing to fight against that. However, I have a bad feeling. Patricia is making so many decisions, sometimes so impulsively, that I fear something will end up going wrong. But well, it is not my problem anymore, right? Update 2. If the first part of this story was painful because I felt emotionally displaced, now everything has reached a completely new level. I have been treated like a useful ATM, only when they need something, but completely ignored in any other circumstance. A few days ago, Clara and Daniel came to visit me. I was very surprised because, honestly, Clara had been so distant lately that our interactions were limited to short and sporadic messages. They entered my house with nervous smiles, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. After exchanging a couple of pleasantries, Clara went straight to the point. "Mom, we have had some problems with the wedding budget. I know you said you wanted to help us, and I thought that maybe you could lend us a hand." I felt a knot in my stomach. Yes, I had offered to help at the beginning, but that was when I still believed that my participation would be valued. Now, after weeks of being treated as if I did not matter, the idea that they were coming to ask me for money was sincerely insulting. I tried to stay calm. I asked them how much they needed and why there were problems with the budget, given that Patricia had insisted on taking control of everything. Clara lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable, while Daniel took the floor. He explained to me that Patricia had made many expensive reservations and that some suppliers had asked for higher payments than expected. In other words, the mother-in-law had exceeded her ambitions, and now they were in a financial mess. I told them that I was willing to help, but under one condition. If I was going to contribute money, I wanted to have a more active role in organizing the wedding. I was not saying that I wanted to control everything, but at least I wanted my voice to be heard, especially if I was going to be the one to fix their problems. Clara's reaction was immediate. Her eyes filled with tears, but not of sadness, but of frustration. "Mom, you do not need to get involved. Everything is practically decided. We just need a little support to cover these unforeseen expenses." Unforeseen expenses, of course. I tried to make her understand that it was not just about the money. For me, this went far beyond the financial aspect. It was a matter of respect, a feeling that I had a place in her life and in this important event, but every time I tried to explain how I felt, Clara cut me off with phrases like, "Do not take it like that, Mom," or "Patricia knows what she is doing. We do not want to complicate things further." Finally, I told them no. It was not a difficult decision because despite everything, I do not want my daughter to have problems at her wedding, but after so many weeks of feeling relegated, ignored, and belittled, I simply could not do it. I told them that I regretted not being able to help them financially if they were not willing to include me in any meaningful way. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Daniel seemed to want to say something, but Clara stopped him with a gesture. She got up, said goodbye quickly, and left the house without looking back. Since then, I have not heard anything from her. I found out from an aunt that Clara and Daniel are trying to raise the money by other means, and that Patricia is even looking for alternatives to reduce some costs. Apparently, Patricia was not happy with my refusal and said something like, "If she is not willing to help, then she should not complain about what happens." That left me frozen. That Patricia does not respect me does not surprise me at this point, but hearing that my daughter did not defend my position was a low blow. I am realizing that for Clara, I am no longer her mother who is always there to support her. Now I am someone expendable, an obstacle when I do not do what she wants. For the first time, I am starting to seriously consider if I want to be present at that wedding. Update 3. I do not even know where to start. It seems that karma is finally doing its job, and I am not going to lie. Although it hurts me for my daughter, I cannot help but feel a kind of silent satisfaction seeing how things are starting to crumble. Since I told them that I would not give them money, Clara and Daniel have practically stopped talking to me. The few times that I have heard from them have been through third parties, mainly my sister who is aware of the preparations. And well, it turns out that Patricia's decisions, those that were supposedly so elegant and modern, are starting to cause serious problems. First, the venue that Patricia had reserved, a very expensive event hall in an exclusive area, had problems with the payments. From what I heard, Patricia did not deliver the complete deposit on time because she thought she could negotiate a discount at the last minute. The result was that the venue gave them an ultimatum. Either they paid the full amount immediately or they would lose the reservation. Patricia, of course, did not want to admit that there was an error, so she started looking for another place at the last minute. And believe me, getting a decent place for a wedding with so little time is practically impossible. But that is not all. It turns out that Patricia had also been delaying the payments for the catering, hoping to find another more exclusive provider. This meant that when she finally decided to return to the first provider, they were no longer available for the date. Now they are running around like crazy trying to find someone who can take care of the food. And from what I have heard, the only thing they have achieved are options that are much more expensive than the initial ones. The chaos does not end there. According to my sister, Patricia also changed the flowers that Clara had originally chosen because they did not match the sophisticated tone of the event. Instead of natural flowers, Patricia opted for artificial flowers to save money. When Clara discovered it, she had a nervous breakdown because, according to her, that completely ruined the aesthetic she wanted. I imagine that it was one of the few times in which my daughter dared to question Patricia, but it was already too late. The irony of all this is that the wedding is starting to look less like that high-level event that Patricia promised and more like a badly organized disaster. Meanwhile, I have been observing everything from a distance without intervening. I know that some will think that I should offer my help, but why should I do it? From the beginning, they made it clear to me that my opinion was not welcome. This is the wedding that Patricia wanted to organize, so now let her face the consequences of her decisions. The most interesting thing of all happened a couple of days ago. Clara called me after weeks of silence. I finally heard her voice, and I am not going to lie. For a second I thought that maybe she was calling me to reconcile, but no. "Mom, I need you to help me." That was the beginning of the conversation. She explained to me in tears all the problems they were facing. She told me how Patricia had ruined several important aspects of the wedding and how she was now completely stressed because nothing was going as she had imagined. She practically begged me to use my contacts and my experience to fix everything. I am not going to deny that for a moment I felt the temptation to say yes. After all, she is my daughter, and I hate to see her suffer. But then I remembered all the disrespectful comments, all the times that they made me feel invisible, all the decisions in which I was excluded. I remembered that Patricia looked me in the eyes and told me practically that I had no place in this wedding. So I took a deep breath and told her, "I am sorry, Clara, but I cannot help you anymore. This is your wedding and your decisions. I hope everything goes well, but I am not going to get involved now." There was a long silence. I could hear her ragged breathing, as if she was trying not to cry. Finally, she said to me in a cold tone, "I understand," and hung up. I know it seems cruel, but at this point, I feel that it is the best thing. Clara needs to understand that decisions have consequences. You cannot reject someone over and over again, treating them as if they did not matter, and then expect them to come and save you when everything falls apart. For now, I am firm in my decision not to get involved, but I have the feeling that this will not be the last thing I hear about this wedding. Update 4. The wedding that was supposedly going to be a perfect and sophisticated event has gone from being a dream party to a monumental chaos. And all this while Patricia, the self-proclaimed wedding expert, tries to maintain the facade of control. Spoiler, she is not succeeding. Shortly after my last update, my sister came to visit me. I am not going to lie. I was somewhat nervous that she would try to convince me to get involved in the preparations because I know that she has always been one of those who hate conflicts and prefer to maintain the peace. But to my surprise, she did not come to talk to me about Clara or Patricia. She came to tell me what was happening from the inside, as a kind of juicy gossip that she could not keep anymore. First, it seems that Patricia and Clara are having constant fights. According to my sister, Clara is finally realizing that letting Patricia make all the decisions was a mistake. Apparently, my daughter always assumed that Patricia, with her experience and her money, knew what she was doing, but now, with the wedding only a few weeks away and an endless list of problems to solve, Clara is on the verge of collapse. One of the biggest points of conflict was the wedding dress. Clara had chosen a beautiful and simple dress, something that reflected her personality. But Patricia insisted that it was too basic and convinced her to change it for something more elaborate. The result? A dress that was not only more expensive but also needed adjustments that were not yet finished. And here comes the worst. The designer that Patricia hired for the adjustments is in another city, which means that Clara has to travel constantly for the fittings. This is not only generating stress, but also additional expenses that were not in the budget. Then there is the issue of the suppliers. Patricia, in her obsession with finding the best of the best, did not take the time to investigate thoroughly, and some of the suppliers she hired are not fulfilling what was promised. For example, the photographer who, according to Patricia, was of international renown, apparently only has experience doing photo shoots for social networks and does not know how to handle such a large event. Clara discovered this during a recent meeting when the photographer asked her if they could do a simulation of the wedding before the real day to practice. But what really made everything explode was the issue of the catering. As I mentioned before, Patricia lost the first provider and ended up hiring a much more expensive one. To compensate for the increased costs, she decided to reduce the menu without consulting anyone. Now, instead of a full meal, the guests will receive small canopy-type dishes, which has infuriated Clara because it is not what she had imagined for her wedding. According to my sister, there was a monumental fight between Clara and Patricia, and for the first time, my daughter dared to raise her voice. "This is not your wedding, Patricia. It is mine, and you are ruining it." That phrase was what started the crossfire. Patricia, instead of apologizing or trying to calm things down, responded with something that I still cannot believe she said. "If it were not for me, this wedding would not even be possible. Your mother could not help you, so someone had to take charge." When my sister told me this, I felt a mixture of rage and sadness. How dare that woman use my decision not to get involved as a weapon against my daughter? But at the same time, I kept thinking, what did Clara expect? Patricia showed from the beginning who she was, and yet she decided to side with her. And here comes the part that really shocked me. After that fight, Clara called me again, this time not to ask me for money, but to try to reconcile with me. Her voice sounded tired, as if she was on the verge of tears. She told me that she had made a mistake by letting Patricia get so involved, and that now she did not know how to fix things. She asked me to at least attend the wedding, that she did not want me to miss that important day. Despite everything that had happened, I told her that I would think about it, but deep down I already knew my answer. I cannot pretend that everything is fine when it is not. I cannot sit at that wedding watching Patricia strut around as if she were the great savior while I was treated as if I did not matter. To be completely honest, I think this wedding is doomed from the beginning. And although it hurts me for my daughter, there is a part of me that feels that this is exactly what had to happen so that she understands the value of the people who really support her. Final update. Clara and Daniel's wedding finally happened, and as you may already imagine, I did not attend. It was a decision that weighed heavily on me because although I am angry and disappointed with how Clara treated me throughout this process, she is still my daughter. However, after meditating deeply, I realized that I could not sit there smiling, pretending that everything was fine when I had been treated with so little respect. So, I sent a clear and concise message a few days before the event. Clara, I am very sorry that I cannot attend the wedding. I wish you and Daniel the best in this new chapter of your lives. I hope everything goes as you dreamed. Her response was short, almost cold. Understood. Thanks for letting me know. After that, I did not hear from her again until after the wedding. Let me tell you what I found out about the big day. It sounds like something out of a black comedy. The wedding was, in the words of several family members, a complete disaster. First, the place that Patricia got at the last minute turned out to be a small hall, clearly not designed to accommodate the number of guests they were expecting. According to what I was told, many people had to stand during the ceremony because there were not enough chairs. Some even ended up in a corner near the doors where they could not even see well what was happening. The issue of the catering was another big problem. As I mentioned before, Patricia decided to reduce the menu to save costs, but she did not bother to communicate it adequately to the guests. This led to many people being left hungry, and there were no shortage of complaints among the attendees. There was even a group of people who, according to what I was told, went to look for fast food in the middle of the reception because they could no longer stand the hunger. Clara's dress did not escape the disaster either. The designer that Patricia hired for the adjustments did not deliver it until the day before the wedding. And to make matters worse, the adjustments were not done correctly. The dress did not fit well. It was too tight in some parts and loose in others. Throughout the ceremony, Clara had to be adjusting the fabric so that it did not look bad. And then came the total collapse. The DJ, apparently Patricia hired a friend of a friend who knew about music, and what they got was a guy with a generic song playlist and zero experience in animating an event. There were long silences between songs, poor microphone management, and at one point he even put on the wrong song during the bride and groom's dance. But the real drama occurred towards the end of the night. According to what I was told, Patricia had been giving orders to everyone as if she were the owner of the event, which began to irritate some guests. At one point, Clara exploded in front of everyone. She said to Patricia something like, "I am sick of you controlling everything. You ruined my wedding." The attention in the hall was palpable. Patricia, of course, did not remain silent. According to those who were present, she responded with something like, "If I ruined it for you, it is because your mother was not here to help you. I did what I could." That comment was like a bomb. Clara started crying, and Daniel had to take her out of the hall to calm her down. Meanwhile, many of the guests began to leave, uncomfortable with the whole situation. Of course, I found out about all this through third parties, mainly my sister and some family members who attended. When they told me, I did not know whether to laugh or feel sorry. Do not misunderstand me. I do not enjoy seeing my daughter suffer, but at the same time, I feel that this was a lesson that she needed to learn. Throughout this time, she let Patricia take absolute control. She rejected me, and in the end, everything ended up being a disaster. After the wedding, Clara called me. Her voice sounded tired, defeated. She told me that she regretted how things had turned out and that in retrospect, she should have listened to me from the beginning. She admitted that Patricia manipulated her and that her desire to please everyone ended up costing her the day she had always dreamed of. She did not apologize directly, but her tone said more than her words. I listened to her calmly. I did not interrupt her or say, "I told you so." When she finished talking, I just told her, "Clara, I am sorry that you had to go through all that, but I hope that this helps you to understand that not always the people who seem to have the best intentions are the ones who really support you. If someday you really need my help, I will be here." It was a brief conversation, but I think it marked a turning point. Since then, we have talked a little more, but I still feel that there is a distance between us. Clara has a lot to reflect on, and I also need to process all this before we can completely heal our relationship. For now, I am calm with my decision not to have attended. I do not know if this can be considered revenge, but I feel that letting Patricia carry all the weight of her own decisions was the best thing I could do. The end of this story I still do not know, but if something is clear, it is that the most important lessons in life often come in the most difficult way. Story 3. My boyfriend wants to go away with his ex to close cycles, but karma closed the door on him when he ran out of money and a place to live. I am going to be honest, I do not even know how to start this. I have been feeling a knot in my chest for days, as if someone had pulled the rug out from under me from one moment to the next, all because my boyfriend, with whom I have been in a serious relationship for 3 years, living together for almost 2, has just dropped a bombshell that left me in shock. So here it goes. He told me that he needs to go away for a weekend with his ex to close cycles. Yes, you read that right. His ex, whom he broke up with more than 5 years ago, and whom he had not seen since then, contacted him out of the blue to tell him that she needed to apologize and have a deep conversation about how they broke up. And he, instead of laughing in her face or ignoring the message, as any person with common sense would do, decided that it is a great idea to go away with her to another city to talk. When he told me, I thought he was joking. I literally laughed nervously, waiting for him to say something like, it is a joke. Obviously, I would not do that. But no, he looked at me with that face of, this is something serious, and started with a speech that seemed taken from some cheap self-help book, that he needs to heal his past, that he cannot move on completely with me if he has these loose ends, that he wants to be a better person, and this is an important step. And while he was talking, I just felt as if someone was tightening a screw inside my head. Why? What kind of cheap excuse is that? Am I crazy? Or is this a total lack of respect? I told him that it did not make me feel comfortable, that I did not understand why it was necessary, and that if I were in his place, I would never consider something like that. And do you know what he answered me? That I should not feel insecure because he is completely committed to me. Committed? Seriously? Is leaving me alone in our house to go away with your ex under the guise of personal growth being committed? Honestly, I am between angry, hurt, and completely confused. It makes me feel as if I were the problem for not supporting his process. But should I even be considering this? I want to think that I am being understanding by listening to his point of view, but at the same time, every fiber of my being screams at me that this is wrong. The worst thing is that I do not know how to handle it. He seems so convinced that this is something necessary that it even makes me doubt if I am exaggerating. Update 1. Well, what was going to happen happened. I tried to talk to him several times. I tried to explain to him how uncomfortable his decision to go away with his ex made me feel, but it was like talking to a wall. He told me that he understood my feelings, that it hurt him to see me like that, but that he needed to do this to be at peace with himself and with our relationship. According to him, this trip was not only something personal, but something that would also benefit both of us in the long run. What kind of logic is that? I tried everything, seriously. I tried to reason with him, to ask him if there was another way to close cycles that did not involve being face-to-face with someone who clearly should no longer have a place in his life. A call, an email, therapy maybe, but no, his answer was always the same. This is something I have to do in person. It is the right thing to do. So, last weekend he packed his suitcase and left, and I stayed alone in our house, wondering at what point my life became this disaster. I swear to you that it was as if my whole world stopped. I could not eat, I could not sleep, and every time I looked at my phone, I felt like my chest was going to explode. I could not help but imagine what he was doing, what he was saying, how he would be looking with her. Was he giving her one of those long and nostalgic hugs that only exes give each other? Were they remembering the good times while I was here suffering? I felt completely alone, and the worst thing is that a part of me knew that I had to know what was happening. So, I did something that I am not particularly proud of. I checked his social media. First, nothing. His profile was completely inactive, as if he did not want to leave a trace of his wonderful healing trip. But then, by pure instinct, I went to her profile, and there they were. Photos. Not many, but enough to make me feel as if I had been kicked in the stomach. One was of them in a park, smiling as if they were on a romantic date. Another was of her alone with a caption that said something like, "Sometimes closing cycles means opening new chapters. Closing cycles, or opening doors that should never have been opened." I confronted him as soon as he returned. As soon as he crossed the door, I asked him to explain those photos. Do you know what he did? He laughed nervously as if I were exaggerating, and then he told me that it was not what it seemed. According to him, they were spontaneous moments that she wanted to capture and that he did not even know that she had uploaded them. When I asked him if they stayed in the same house, at first, he tried to dodge the question, but when I pressured him, he admitted that yes, he did. He told me that it was nothing and that it was simply more convenient because that way they could talk calmly. Convenient? Talk calmly while I was in our house, unable to sleep. Wondering if I was being betrayed? I told him that I felt completely betrayed, that this had nothing to do with closing cycles and everything to do with disrespecting me. But he, instead of apologizing, started with a speech about how I did not understand the context and how all this was a process. Since when does being in a relationship mean enduring this level of humiliation? I am completely broken. I do not know what to do. I feel like the person who is supposed to love and respect me threw me under the bus, and the worst thing of all is that he does not seem even remotely sorry. Update 2. If I thought that the situation could not get worse, I was terribly wrong. All this escalated in a way that I never imagined. After that initial confrontation, the following weeks were a chaos. We continued living together because, honestly, I felt too confused to make a drastic decision. He continued to assure me that nothing had happened between them, that it was all an innocent conversation, and that I was reacting exaggeratedly. But at the same time, he never made any real effort to calm my insecurities or to show me that I could trust him. Do you know what is the worst? I began to believe that maybe I was exaggerating. I wondered if my jealousy and insecurities were the real problem, if I was the one who was damaging our relationship with my inability to let things go. I felt like a crazy paranoiac, but there was something in my instinct that I simply could not ignore. Then something happened that I did not expect. One night, while I was using my laptop to work, I realized that he had left his email open, and do not judge me, but the temptation was too strong. Something inside me knew that I had to look for answers because clearly I was not going to get them from him. What I found left me completely shattered. There was an email from his ex sent just a few days after their healing trip. It was very long, like a novel, full of cloying words and reflections on their past together. But what really broke me was the part in which she said something like, "I am so glad that we had this time to reconnect. I cannot help but think about all that we could be if we decided to give ourselves a second chance. You have always been the love of my life." That was not the worst thing. The worst thing was his response. He did not deny anything. He did not set any limits. In fact, he wrote back saying that he had also been thinking about their time together and that he was confused about his feelings, that although he was with someone else, he could not ignore that she would always have a special place in his heart. Confused? I cannot describe what I felt at that moment. It was a mixture of anger, sadness, and an enormous emptiness. How could someone who said he loved me write something like that to another person? How could he have the audacity to continue sleeping under my same roof, as if nothing were wrong? I confronted him that same night. I literally threw the phone in front of him and asked him to explain that email. At first, he tried to deny it as if he did not know what I was talking about, but when I read his own words aloud, he collapsed. First, he cried. He cried as if he were the victim in all this. He said that he was confused, that he did not know how to handle his emotions, and that he never wanted to hurt me, that he loved me, but that he also needed to understand his feelings towards her before he could move for war. Be with me. Move forward with me. After all this, I am not going to lie. For a moment, I almost fell into his manipulation. It is incredible how someone can destroy you and still make you feel that you have to stay and help him fix his problems, but something inside me clicked. I realized that I was allowing him to play with my dignity and that if I continued to allow it, I was not going to respect myself. I told him to leave, that I did not care where he stayed, but that he could not continue living in my house. He was in shock as if he had never imagined that I would really kick him out. He tried to convince me that we could fix it, but I had already made my decision. He packed some things and left that same night. Later, I found out that he stayed at a friend's house while he reflected on what he really wanted. And do you know what was the worst? Just a week after leaving, he sent me a message to tell me that he had decided to end things with me because he needed to explore his feelings towards his ex. Yes, after all the damage he did to me, he had the nerve to be the one to end the relationship. But that is not all. He also asked me to return some furniture that we bought together because, according to him, he needed them to furnish his new life. New life? I do not know if I should laugh or cry. He literally used me as a bridge while he resolved if he wanted to return with his ex, and now he pretends that I facilitate his transition? Obviously, I told him no. The furniture is in my name. and he barely paid a fraction of what they cost. When I told him, he exploded. He called me selfish, immature, and a lot of other things that I prefer not to repeat. I blocked him immediately. Since then, I found out through acquaintances that he went to live with his ex supposedly. They are happy and starting from scratch. I am not going to lie, it hurt me a lot to hear that. But I also realized something important. I do not want someone like that in my life. He and his ex deserve each other. Update 3. This is getting more and more surreal. I thought that after kicking him out of my life, I would be able to start healing and move on. But it seems that this man has no limits. After I blocked him, I spent weeks trying to rebuild myself. The first week was brutal. Every corner of my house reminded me of him. From the place where we used to have breakfast to the sofa where we spent Sundays watching series. It was very difficult for me to stop checking his social media, but I knew that I had to do it. I could not continue to torture myself by seeing how he and his ex were building that happy new life that my acquaintances were talking about. However, it was not long before reality caught up with him. A mutual friend who was always more on my side than on his sent me a message with an unexpected update. Apparently, things were not as happy and perfect as he pretended. From what she told me, after a few months living together, his ex began to get tired of him. It turns out that my dear ex is a financial disaster, something that I already knew too well. He had no savings. He had lost his job shortly before moving in with her, and to top it off, he was not doing much to get a new one. Basically, he was living in her house like a parasite while she was carrying all the expenses. Apparently, they had several discussions about it, but the breaking point came when she found out that he was lying about looking for work. She confronted him, and according to my friend, he reacted in the same way that he did with me. He played the victim, cried, said he was stressed, and that he needed time to reorganize, but she did not buy his performance. The best part of all this is that she kicked him out of her house. Yes, the same person for whom he left me, the same woman with whom he was supposedly going to have a new life, decided that it was not worth dealing with him. Now he is without a job, without money, and without a place to stay. And here comes the most ironic of all. He contacted me a week ago. I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I did not know who it was, but then I saw the message and almost spit out the coffee I was drinking. It was him. It said something like, "I know I am the last person you want to hear from, but I have no one else. I am going through a very difficult time, and I was wondering if we could talk. I do not want to bother you. I just need someone who understands me." Someone who understands him? After what he did to me? Of course, I did not respond, but he insisted. He sent me more messages during the following days, some almost begging me to help him. He said that he had nowhere to stay and that it would only be a few days until he could stabilize himself. He also tried to appeal to my emotional side, telling me that I was the only person who really knew him. It was incredibly tempting to respond to him, not to help him, but to give him a piece of my mind, but I decided that it was not worth it. I blocked his number and went to sleep with a smile on my face. The next day, I received another message, this time from his friend. Yes, the same friend who took him in when I kicked him out of my house. It seems that my ex had exhausted his welcome there too, and was trying to get someone else to take care of him. I could not help but laugh at how pathetic it all sounded. How many more doors does he plan to knock on before he realizes that he burned all the ones he had? The last thing I knew is that he is now sleeping on a couch in the house of another acquaintance. Apparently, no one is willing to carry his drama for long, and honestly, I could not be more satisfied seeing how everything that he himself destroyed crumbles. It is as if karma had been waiting patiently to return everything that he did to me. And do you know what? I do not even feel bad for him. This is the life that he chose. Update 4. The turns that life takes, right? If you had told me a few months ago that I would reach this point, I probably would not have believed it. But here I am seeing how my ex's life crumbles while mine, slowly but surely, begins to flourish. And the irony of all this is that without looking for it, it seems that I found the perfect opportunity to give him a final lesson. First, a small summary of how I am doing now. After blocking my ex and the friend who tried to intercede for him, I decided to focus on myself. I went to therapy, bless therapy. I began to resume hobbies that I had set aside while I was with him, and I even enrolled in a photography course that I always wanted to take. Little by little, I began to feel that I was recovering my life. I will not say that everything was easy, but every day I felt stronger and more secure of myself. At work, things also improved. I received a promotion that allowed me to move to a nicer apartment. It is small, but it is completely mine, and I cannot explain how good it feels to enter a place that is full of peace and not of discussions or constant tensions. I even adopted a kitten that I found abandoned near my new house. I named it Karma. Yes, I am not kidding because, well, life has its way of balancing things, right? Now, returning to the subject of my ex, a couple of weeks ago, I was having coffee with my friend, the same one who told me all the drama of his life with his ex, and as always, we ended up talking about him. According to what she told me, my ex was not even living on the couch of the acquaintance who took him in. Apparently, he was kicked out too because he never helped with anything, not with money, not with household chores, not even with his own food. He was literally living off air and waiting for people to feel sorry for him. What is interesting is that my friend told me that she had seen him recently in a restaurant where she was dining with her boyfriend, but not as a customer, but as a waiter. Yes, apparently, he had gotten a temporary job in a fairly modest place to be able to pay some of his debts and avoid being on the street. The funniest thing is that according to her, he seemed miserable. At first, I just laughed at the situation. Honestly, after everything he made me go through, seeing him fall so low was a small personal victory. But then something happened that changed the whole panorama. A few days later, I received an unexpected email. It was from the restaurant where he works, but not to talk about him specifically. It turns out that my company was looking for a place to organize an end-of-year event, and that restaurant was one of the options that were being considered. Out of pure curiosity, and I admit a little out of morbidity, I decided to attend the meeting to evaluate the place. When I arrived, it did not take long to see him. He was there dressed in his uniform, cleaning a table. As soon as he saw me, he was completely frozen, as if he had just seen a ghost. It was one of those moments in which you know that you have total control of the situation, and I am not going to lie, I enjoyed it. But I did not do anything at that moment. I limited myself to acting as if I did not know him, although I could feel his gaze fixed on me all the time. After the meeting, the restaurant manager asked me for my opinion about the place, and that was when I decided that it was time to play my cards. I told him that the place was fine, but that I had noticed that one of the employees seemed distracted and that he did not transmit professionalism. I did not mention names, but it was obvious to whom I was referring. The manager thanked me for the feedback and assured me that he would review the situation with his staff. It was petty, maybe I regret it not one bit. A few days later, I found out through my friend that my ex had lost his job. Apparently, the manager called him to talk about his performance and ended up discovering that he had already had several problems with other customers, so he decided to fire him. And here is the best of all. It seems that my ex tried to contact me again after that because I received a message from an unknown number. This time I did not bother to read it. I simply deleted it and blocked the number. Final update. It seems that destiny saved the best for last because even though I already believed that I had moved on, life decided to give me one last opportunity to close this chapter in style. It all started when I received an unexpected call from the owner of the building where I lived with my ex. At first, I did not understand why he was calling me. After all, I no longer lived there, and I had left everything in order before moving out. But it turns out that my ex, in his infinite incompetence, had stopped paying the rent for the time he was there after he moved in with his ex. And since the contract was originally in my name, the landlord wanted to know if he could contact him to resolve the debt. It was at that moment when I had an idea that honestly made me laugh like crazy while I was planning it. First, I explained to the landlord that I no longer had anything to do with my ex, and that technically he had been responsible for the payment since he stayed there, but I also offered to help resolve the situation. What I did was ask him to send me all the details of the debt and any related correspondence. My plan was to use that information to give my ex the final blow. It turns out that he owed several months of rent, in addition to some charges for damage to the apartment because, of course, he could not leave the place in good condition. The total amount was not exorbitant, but it was definitely more than someone in his situation could pay, so I started to investigate, using some connections that I had recently made at my job. I discovered that my ex was trying to get a small loan to cover his debts and rent a new place. But due to his history of defaults, no serious institution was willing to lend him. Then I knew exactly what I had to do. First, I sent him a message from a number that he would not recognize. I pretended to be a loan company interested in helping him. In the message, I explained that we were willing to offer him a loan with flexible conditions and no credit check. As expected, he took the bait almost immediately. In parallel, I made sure to contact the friend who had lent him money and even his ex. I explained to them with evidence, of course, that he was trying to evade his financial responsibilities and that any help they offered him would only sink him further into his own disaster. I am not going to lie, it was incredibly satisfying to hear how little by little all those contacts began to move away from him. When I finally cited him to discuss the terms of the loan, I did it in a public cafe where I knew that he would be surrounded by people. He arrived with a desperate, but at the same time arrogant attitude, as if he thought that he was about to cheat the system again. I sat in front of him with a folder full of all the documents related to his debt. His face when he realized that it was me was priceless. First, he tried to pretend that he was there by mistake, but then I showed him the papers and told him with a smile that I could not hide. You know, I thought a lot about whether I wanted to continue being part of your disaster, and I decided yes, but only to make sure that you do not pass it on to someone else. I explained that I had contacted the landlord, his friends, and anyone else who was involved in his life. I showed him the emails, the messages, everything. At that moment, he could no longer hide his panic. He tried to beg me, saying that he had lost everything and that he only needed an opportunity to start again. An opportunity like the one I gave you and the one you trampled on while leaving with your ex to close cycles? He was silent for the first time in all this time. He seemed to understand the scope of what he had done. To close with a flourish, I told him that the landlord was considering taking legal action if he did not pay his debt within a week, and as I was not going to lose out, I made sure to hire lawyers to take care of the process. Before leaving, I left him there with the papers on the table and his dignity shattered. I got up, paid for my coffee because, of course, I was not going to invite him, and left without looking back. Since then, I have not heard from him again. The last thing I heard is that he is still wandering between temporary jobs and that no one wants to help him, and I am at peace. I feel incredibly free, as if I had finally released the last weight I was carrying. Karma did its job, but I admit that I enjoyed being its right hand in the process. I do not know if this makes me a bad person, but if I learned something from this experience, it is that sometimes the best revenge is simply to make sure that people receive what they deserve. Story 4. My niece calls me a failure for not having children, but when I inherit everything from the family and she gets nothing, she discovers that I was her real mother. I am going to start this by saying something that I have been keeping to myself for years. To give you some context, I am 42 years old. I never married nor had children, at least not publicly, and the truth is, it was never something that I have been obsessed with. I have lived a quiet life focusing on my career, my hobbies, and honestly, on staying as far away as possible from family drama. Because yes, my family is that type of family that seems to compete to see who has the most perfect life in the eyes of others. My older sister, Anna, is the center of that world. She is 47 years old, married to a successful man, and has a daughter, Clara, 23 years old. Clara has always been the star of the family, pretty, intelligent, and well, quite arrogant. Since she was a teenager, she has always been allowed to get away with everything. She is the type of person who enters a room and expects everyone to look at her, and if they do not, she will do something to make sure that they do. Now, here's the problem. Clara has a problem with me. Over the years, her comments towards me have gone from small jokes to blatant insults. She calls me bitter, a failure, and recently, she had the audacity to say in front of the whole family that I am a waste of space. Why? Because I do not have a husband or children. I am not going to lie. It hurts. It hurts more than it should. But what nobody knows is that her attitude towards me not only angers me, but breaks my heart, because every time she opens her mouth to insult me, she reminds me of something that I have been keeping for more than 2 decades. She has no idea who I really am to her. 23 years ago, when I was 19, I found myself in a situation that changed my life forever. I will not go into details yet, but the truth is that Clara is my biological daughter. It was not something planned, nor something that I was prepared to face at that moment. My family was going through a crisis, and I was a girl trying to be an adult. Anna, who was already married and had a stable life, offered to raise Clara as her own. It was a decision that we made together, and although at first I thought it was the best for everyone, not a day goes by that I do not wonder if I made the right decision. Clara grew up thinking that Anna is her mother, and I was always the single aunt. I was never given the credit nor the space to do anything else. I accepted it because I thought it was the best for her. But now, 23 years later, I am wondering if the sacrifice was worth it. I am not going to deny that part of me feels that she deserves to know the truth, especially now that her attacks are becoming unbearable. But how fair would it be for her, for Anna, for the rest of the family? Am I being selfish for wanting to clear my name, even if that means destroying the relationships that she has? I do not know what to do. All I know is that I am tired of being the target of her attacks, tired of living with this secret that is tearing me apart from the inside, tired of being the failure of the family, when in reality, I have sacrificed more than any of them could imagine. This is the first time that I put all this into words, and I cannot help but feel like a time bomb about to explode. Should I tell her the truth, or should I continue carrying this secret as I have done all my life? Update 1. I think it all started to get out of control last Christmas. In my family, the festivities have always been a mixture of tension disguised as joy and a silent competition to see who impresses the most. This year was no different. Anna, as always, was at the center of everything, organizing the dinner in her enormous house with decorations worthy of a magazine. Clara arrived late as always, but not before announcing her entrance with a story that we all had to hear about how she rejected a job offer because, according to her, it was not good enough for her level. Everyone listened to her, of course. That is how it has always been with Clara. Everything revolves around her. And if it is not, she makes sure that it is. But that night her comments were sharper than usual, and they all seemed to be directed towards me. First, it was a casual comment while distributing the glasses of wine. "Oh, Aunt, do not forget to toast for us independent women." Clara, some are independent because we do not need a man, and others because nobody wants them. She dropped it with a smile as if it were an innocent joke, but the table went silent. My mother pretended not to listen, my sister laughed nervously, and my father changed the subject quickly. I just pursed my lips and decided not to give her the pleasure of reacting. Later, when they were serving dessert, she began to talk about her boyfriend. Well, her new boyfriend. Apparently, the previous one was not up to her level, and she had left him to go out with a guy who works in investment banking. Perhaps some people here do not understand what a relationship is because they have never had one, she said, looking directly at me while biting a cookie. I took a deep breath and continued to ignore her. I was not going to fall into her game, not that night. But when the moment of the toast finally arrived, Clara decided to give the final blow. I want to propose a toast for the family, and especially for my aunt, who is always there to remind us what it means to be alone. She is an example of what we do not want to be. I do not know how to describe what I felt at that moment. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room, the uncomfortable looks of my parents, Anna's failed attempt to soften the moment with a nervous laugh, and I was there trying to keep myself together while I felt my patience crumbling piece by piece. I could not take it anymore. I left the glass on the table and stood up. "You know what, Clara?" My voice came out stronger than I expected. "You are incredibly arrogant for someone who has no idea what she is talking about. You have no idea what it means to sacrifice something for another person. You have no idea what I have done for this family, and honestly, I am tired of you talking to me as if I were less than you." The table was completely silent. Clara looked at me with her eyes wide open as if she could not believe that someone dared to raise her voice. My sister tried to intervene, but I raised a hand to stop her. "I am not talking to you, Anna. For years I have let you treat me as if I were worth nothing, and I am fed up. I am fed up with pretending that everything is fine when clearly it is not." Clara laughed, that sarcastic laugh that she always uses when she wants to show that nothing affects her. "And what are you going to do, Aunt? Give me a life lesson? Because honestly, I do not think that someone who has not achieved anything has much to teach me." That was it. I grabbed my purse and stood up from the table. "Do not worry, Clara. Someday you will understand what the word failure means, and I assure you that I will not be the one to carry that title." I left the house without looking back. Driving back to my apartment was a blur. My hands were shaking, and I could barely concentrate on the road. I had never felt so humiliated, but also so determined. Something inside me had changed that night. While I was in bed looking at the ceiling, I understood that I could not continue like this. I could not continue allowing Clara to trample on me, that my sister would remain silent, and that my entire family would act as if I were invisible. I had kept this secret for more than 2 decades, but for the first time in my life, I wondered if it was really worth it. Update 2. After the Christmas dinner, I completely distanced myself from my family. I did not answer their calls or messages, and they did not do much to contact me either. I was not surprised. It has always been like that. When someone makes Anna or Clara uncomfortable, the problem does not exist. They simply ignore it until it dissolves on its own. In those days of distance, I began to reflect a lot about my life. Why was I still allowing them to treat me like a nobody? Clara was one thing, but the lack of support from my sister and my parents hurt me even more. Although I had decided to stay on the sidelines, I felt that something in me had changed. I was no longer willing to remain silent. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected call. It was the lawyer of my parents. At first, I thought it was something related to minor procedures, but his serious tone made me suspect that it was something more. He asked me to go to his office to discuss an important matter related to family assets. When I arrived, I found my parents waiting for me in a private room. They seemed nervous, especially my mother, who could not stop rubbing her hands. My father, always the most pragmatic, went straight to the point. We have decided to make some changes to the will, and we wanted you to know before it is official. Hearing the word will, my heart sank a little. Although my parents are getting old, I had never stopped to think about what would happen when they were no longer here, but what they said next left me completely stunned. We want to leave you the majority of the family assets. At first, I thought I had not heard correctly. I even let out a nervous laugh, thinking it was some kind of misunderstanding, but it was not. My father began to explain that after much reflection, they had decided that I was the most suitable person to receive the family home and most of the money saved. You have always been the most responsible, the one who never asked for anything, the one who was always there for us when we needed it, my mother said with her eyes full of tears. We know that Anna has her own life, and that Clara, well, Clara does not value what she has, but you deserve this. I did not know what to say. On the one hand, I felt recognized in a way that I did not expect, but on the other, I felt uncomfortable. Does Anna know about this? I asked, trying to gauge the situation. Not yet, my father replied in a serious tone. And we know that she will not be happy, but this is our decision. I left that meeting with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was moved that my parents finally saw my value after so many years of feeling ignored, but I also knew that this was going to unleash a family conflict like we had never seen before. It was not long before Anna and Clara found out. My parents decided to tell them during a family dinner to which I was of course not invited. Although in this case, it was a relief. According to what my mother told me later, Anna tried to maintain her composure, but Clara, true to her style, exploded. How can you do this? She shouted. According to my mother, that woman has done nothing for this family. She is a loser who does not even know what it means to have a life. My mother tried to explain that the decision was not about rewarding or punishing, but about ensuring that the assets were managed in a responsible way, but Clara did not accept it. She could not. In her mind, she already saw herself living in the family home with enough money to continue her life of luxury and carefree living. That same night, Clara did what she does best, bring the drama to social media. She published a long and venomous message in which, without mentioning me directly, she made it clear that she was furious because someone without any merit was stealing what belonged to her by right. Although I do not follow her on social media, several family friends sent me screenshots as if they needed to make sure that I knew what was happening. The message said something like, "It is funny how in some families those who never contribute anything end up taking everything. But well, I guess some prefer to steal instead of working for what they want." In the end, karma always finds a way to balance things. The most ironic thing is that Clara does not understand what karma means. If she did, she would know that karma is about to catch up with her. Although her publication bothered me, what really hurt me was Anna's silence. There was not a single call, a message, not even an apology for her daughter's attacks. Instead of trying to mediate or even talk to me, Anna stayed on the sidelines as she always has. That night, while reading the messages of support that Clara received from her followers, most of whom have no idea of the truth, I felt something inside me harden. For years, I had endured her insults, her mockery, and her condescending attitude, but now, with all this, I knew that the dynamic had changed. It was no longer just a matter of enduring her comments. Now I was determined that when the moment came, Clara would face the truth. Update 3. After the incident with the will, Clara began a personal campaign to destroy me. I do not know if it was because she really believed that she could make my parents change their minds, or simply because her ego could not handle the idea of not being the center of everything. Perhaps it was a mixture of both things. It all started with passive-aggressive comments at family gatherings, the few that I dared to attend. Every time I tried to speak, she made sure to interrupt me or to make comments like, "Oh, it is great that you have so much free time to give your opinion. I guess it is easy when you do not have a busy life like others." My sister, as usual, did not say anything. She only limited herself to looking away or changing the subject, as if ignoring the situation were the magic solution. My parents, although they were on my side in theory, also seemed uncomfortable confronting her, but things became much more personal when Clara took her attacks outside the family sphere. One afternoon, a coworker sent me a worrying message. "Have you seen what your niece posted?" She wrote, attaching a screenshot of a story on Instagram. There it was, a photo of Clara in the family home with a caption that said, "It is sad to see how some people cling to things that do not belong to them just because they know that they will never be able to build something of their own. But do not worry, everything will be fixed soon. Justice always wins." It was an indirect but clear attack. The photo had been taken in the living room of my parents' house, a space that I had always considered special. Seeing her use that place as a scenario to humiliate me left me speechless. It did not take long to escalate. Clara began to release innuendos in her publications about how some people were exploiting others and how karma would reach them soon. She even sent private messages to some mutual friends insinuating that I was unstable and envious of her success. But the worst came a couple of weeks later when I received a call from human resources at my work. Someone had sent an anonymous email with insinuations about my professional conduct. The content was ridiculous. It said that I was lazy, unreliable, and that I abused my colleagues. My bosses, who know me well, did not pay attention to the matter, but the situation made it clear to me that Clara was willing to sink me if necessary. It was then when I made a decision. For years I had carried this secret because I thought it was the best for everyone. But Clara was making it clear to me that she did not deserve that protection. She had crossed a line, and I no longer felt obliged to remain silent. So, I began to plan. First, I gathered all the documentation that I had about my pregnancy. I had saved every medical record, every ultrasound, and every letter that Anna and I exchanged during that period. I also spoke with a close friend who had been my greatest support when I gave birth. She was more than willing to testify if necessary. Then I went to my parents and explained my decision to them. At first, my mother was reluctant. "But what would you gain with this?" she asked me with a mixture of concern and resignation. "It is not about gaining something, Mom," I replied. "It is about Clara needing to understand that she cannot treat me this way, and she needs to know the truth." My father, on the other hand, supported me from the beginning. "It is your decision," he said with a firmness that surprised me. "And I think it is time for things to come to light." I knew that the revelation was going to be an earthquake for the family, but I also knew that I could not take it anymore. Clara needed to face the consequences of her actions, and I was ready to make sure that she did. The perfect moment arrived a few days later when my parents organized a meeting to talk about the will in a definitive way. All the members of the family would be there, including Clara, of course. Update 4. The family meeting was just what I expected, an emotionally mined field. The living room of my parents' house was full, and although everyone was trying to maintain a casual conversation, the atmosphere was tense. Anna was sitting near my mother with a strained smile on her face, while Clara was playing with her phone, ignoring everyone. When I arrived, Clara barely looked up to dedicate me a mordant comment. "Oh, what a surprise that you decided to come, Aunt. I guess you were afraid of missing something important." I ignored her. My mind was too focused on what I was about to do to waste time on her venomous comments. My parents began by explaining that they wanted to talk about the will in an open way so that there would be no confusion. My father explained calmly why they had made the decision to leave me most of the family assets. He spoke of my constancy, of my support to them in difficult times, and of how they believed that I was the right person to take care of what they had worked so hard to build. He did not get very far before Clara interrupted. "This is ridiculous," she said, standing up from her chair and crossing her arms. "Are we really going to pretend that this makes sense? I do not want to be rude, but we all know that she has done nothing to deserve it. It is an insult to all of us." Anna tried to calm her down, but Clara was in full monologue. I cannot believe that you are rewarding mediocrity. All she has done is sit alone in her apartment, while we, the people who have really worked hard, are ignored. That was the moment. I stood up, holding a folder in my hands, and spoke with a calmness that I did not know I could have. Clara, you are right. This situation does not make sense, and since you insist so much on talking about who deserves what, I think it is time for us to hear the whole truth. The room went completely silent. Clara frowned confused, while Anna looked at me with her eyes wide open as if she knew what was about to happen. Clara, have you ever wondered why your parents have never had another child? I asked, looking directly into her eyes. Her expression went from confusion to irritation. What does that have to do with anything? She responded with disdain. I took a deep breath. Because you are not really Anna's daughter. You are mine. The declaration fell like a bomb. Clara blinked without fully understanding what I had just said. Anna covered her mouth with her hands, while my mother let out a gasp. My father remained silent, staring at the table. Clara laughed, an incredulous and forced laugh. This has to be a joke. I opened the folder and took out the documents, medical certificates, hospital records, and a worn photo of my pregnancy that I had saved for years. It is not a joke, Clara. 23 years ago, I became pregnant in complicated circumstances. I could not raise you, and Anna and her husband were struggling to have a child, so we made an agreement. They would raise you as their own, and I would stay away so that you would have a stable and happy life. Clara's face went from disbelief to anger. This cannot be true. Anna, tell me it is not true. Anna was trembling. Her voice came out weak and broken. It is true. The silence that followed was unbearable. Clara seemed to be looking for something, anything that she could use to deny what she had just heard. Finally, she turned to me with her eyes full of tears, but not of sadness, but of rage. And what do you expect to achieve with this? Do you want me to thank you? Do you expect me to now treat you as if you were someone important? I remained firm. I expect nothing, Clara, but I am tired of you treating me as if I were worth nothing, when in reality, everything I have done has been for you. I have sacrificed my happiness, my personal life, and my relationship with this family so that you would have the best possible opportunity, and the only thing I have received in return is contempt. Clara looked at me as if she wanted to hit me. This does not change anything, she said coldly. You are still a failure. I laughed, a bitter laugh. Maybe I am, but at least now you know the truth. Anna tried to approach Clara, but she pushed her away with a brusque gesture. I do not want to know anything about you, she said before running out of the room. That night ended in chaos. My parents tried to calm me down. Anna was crying inconsolably, and my mother kept repeating that everything had gone wrong. But for me, it was a relief. For the first time in years, I no longer carried that secret. Clara now knew the truth, and although I was not yet finished with her, I felt that I finally had control of the situation. Final update. After that night, Clara distanced herself from everyone. She blocked my parents, Anna, and even me on social media. According to what some acquaintances told me, she began to spread false stories saying that everything I had revealed was a lie invented by me to manipulate the family. I did not expect less from her. Clara has never been someone who accepts the truth with ease. What she did not know is that I still had a card up my sleeve. For years, I had kept evidence of how Clara had taken advantage of my parents' generosity. Money that she asked for and never returned, objects from the family home that she had sold without permission, even screenshots of messages in which she spoke badly of them while still demanding more. When the day came when my parents will become official, Clara appeared at the legal meeting, clearly thinking that she could still negotiate something in her favor, but when the lawyer read the final terms, it was clear that she would not receive a single penny. Everything was passing into my name. The family home, the savings, even some family jewels that she always assumed would be hers. The expression on her face was a spectacle. She tried to protest, saying that it was an injustice, but my father, who rarely raised his voice, interrupted her. Clara, your attitude has made it clear to us that you do not know how to value anything that is given to you. This is our decision, and it will not be discussed. At that moment, I took out the folder with all the evidence that I had accumulated and said, and just in case you are planning to start any legal drama, Clara, I warn you that I have proof of all the abuses and manipulations that you have committed against this family. I suggest you accept this as a lesson in humility." Clara had nothing more to say. She left furious, and that was the last time I saw her in person. Since then, things have changed. My parents and I have begun to rebuild our relationship, although it has not been easy. Anna, for her part, is still trying to reconcile with me, but I am not ready for that yet. Clara, according to what I heard, moved to another city, but she continues trying to live her perfect life on social media as if nothing had happened. Although some might think that I was cruel in revealing the truth, I see it differently. Clara spent years belittling and humiliating me, believing herself to be untouchable. Now she knows that she is not, and best of all, no matter how hard she tries, she will never be able to erase the fact that everything she despises about me is also part of her. Story 5. My parents take away my family business to give it to my golden brother, but when they are left with nothing, he refuses to help them and leaves them in ruin. My family has always been complicated. I do not know if to call it favoritism or simply an unspoken hierarchy, but since I have memory, my parents have put my younger brother Mark on a pedestal. He is the golden boy, the perfect younger son who can never do anything wrong, even if he literally does nothing. Meanwhile, I was always the responsible daughter, the one who had to prove her worth over and over again just to receive a good job from them. And all this reached a critical point a few months ago. Since I finished college, I have been working with my parents in a family business, a coffee shop. It was not much when we started, we barely had customers, and the good days were rare, but I worked like crazy to make it grow. I designed the menu, created the social media, started online promotions, and over time we managed to position ourselves as the neighborhood's favorite place. My parents were always proud of our family business, and they loved to say that we were a team, but what I did not realize until now is that I was the only one who was really doing all the work. A few months ago, my parents said that they wanted to talk to me about the future of the coffee shop. Honestly, I thought that this would be the moment in which they would officially pass me the reins. They always said that one day it would be my business. They always made me believe that all this hard work would be worth it because I was building something that would be mine, but no. Instead of that, they told me that they were going to pass the torch to Mark. According to them, I had already done enough, and now it was my brother's turn to prove his worth. Prove his worth? Mark, who does not even know how to make a coffee. Mark, who has had more jobs than months in a year because he always quits them. Mark, who literally does not even drink coffee. When I asked them what this meant for me, my mom told me, "Well, you could teach your brother everything you know so that he can take over smoothly, and then maybe you can look for something else that you are passionate about. You have already done a lot, daughter. You have already done a lot, daughter." I almost had a laughing fit. All my effort, all the sacrifices, all the years of dedicating myself to the business, and now I just had to teach my brother and leave? I tried to explain to them that this was unfair, that I had been the one who made the business grow, that if Mark took over, he would ruin it, but they did not listen to me. My dad said something like, "You have to understand that Mark needs this opportunity. You have always been strong and capable. You know you can get ahead anywhere, but your brother needs this more than you." The worst thing was that Mark was there while we were talking with that arrogant smile of his without even trying to defend me or thank me. I think he was even enjoying the drama. That night, I could not sleep. I felt betrayed in a way that I cannot describe. It was not just the business. It was the fact that my parents, the people who were supposed to support me, basically told me that I did not matter, that everything I had done could be ignored because Mark needed it more. I am devastated. I do not know what to do. For now, I am still working there because I do not want to leave the clients and the team that it cost me so much to build, but every day it is more difficult. Update 1. It is incredible how much things can change in so little time, and not precisely for the better. It has already been 8 months since the first publication. Many told me to simply walk away, to look for something better, and although at first I thought it was impossible, I decided to start planning my departure. It was not easy to work in the coffee shop knowing that they were going to snatch it away to give it to Mark. It was like a wound that did not stop bleeding. My parents acted as if everything was fine, as if I agreed with this absurd transition. My mom even started telling me that I should be more patient with Mark because he did not have my experience, but he would surely learn quickly with my help. The last straw was when Mark started bringing his girlfriend Tiffany to the business, as if she owned everything. Tiffany has no interest in the coffee shop beyond its aesthetics for Instagram. One day I saw her taking photos at the bar, moving the cups and the televisions to make them look better while telling me that the place needed a more modern touch. I wanted to scream at her that she did not know anything about what really made a business work, but I swallowed my words because I was already too tired to fight. Then Mark started firing the staff that we had hired. Some had been with us for years, but according to Mark, we needed new, fresher faces that fit with the vibe that I want to give the place. That was the last straw. So one day I simply left. I did not make a big announcement or a drama. I finished my shift, went to the employee room, grabbed my things, and left. When my mom called me the next day to ask me why I had not gone to work, I told her that it was no longer my problem. Finding another job was difficult at first. My whole resume was focused on the coffee shop, and I felt as if the whole world was reminding me of how much I had lost. But I finally got a job in a local coffee shop that was looking for someone with experience. The owner is a very kind older man who really appreciates my work. It is not the same as having my own business, but at least here I feel that my effort is valued. Meanwhile, things in the family coffee shop started to go wrong, just as many of you predicted. Mark fired almost all the staff and brought his friends to work with him, inexperienced people who treated customers as if they were doing them a favor by serving them. He changed the menu, eliminating some of the most popular dishes, and tried to raise prices to attract a more exclusive public. The clientele started to disappear quickly. The reviews on social media were brutal. Comments like, "This place used to be amazing, but now it is a disaster, and the service is terrible, and the new prices are not worth it," began to appear every week. My parents started to get nervous. My mom called me several times, at first to ask me for advice on how to fix things, but then to try to convince me to come back. According to her, it was not fair that I disengaged from something that we had built together when clearly for them I was disposable. I told her that I had already done enough, just as they themselves told me when they decided to give everything to Mark. Mark, of course, did not even try to fix anything. It was always his style. When something gets difficult, he simply quits. I recently heard that he was considering selling the coffee shop equipment to recover some money. I am not surprised in the least. I am not going to lie. Seeing how everything falls apart has provoked mixed feelings in me. On one hand, it hurts me because I worked so hard to build that place. But on the other hand, I cannot help but feel that this is exactly what they deserved. Update 2. 6 months have passed since I left the family coffee shop, and although at first it was difficult to adapt, now I feel that I made the best decision of my life. But as I imagined, things for my family have only gotten worse. First, the obvious. The coffee shop closed. It does not surprise me. To be honest, from the moment Mark started to manage the business, it was doomed to fail. His friends, the ones he hired as employees, were a total disaster. They arrived late, forgot orders, and according to a client that I still know, they even argued among themselves in front of the diners. Then there was the problem of money. Mark did not know how to manage finances. He raised prices absurdly, but he did not invest in improving the service or the quality, so the few customers who kept going ended up fed up. After a couple of months without being able to pay the rent of the place, the owners simply evicted them. My parents were devastated. I do not know if it was because they finally understood that they had made a mistake by giving everything to Mark, or because they were facing the financial consequences, maybe both things. What I do know is that they started selling things from the house to pay the debts that accumulated, and as many of you could guess, Mark was not there to help them. At first, my parents tried to justify him. "Mark is going through a difficult time," my mom said, "or he is busy looking for a new opportunity." But the truth was much simpler. Mark simply disappeared. According to what I heard, he and Tiffany moved to another city shortly after the coffee shop closed. They did not leave an address, did not answer calls, and when they finally managed to contact him, he told them something like, "That was your problem, not mine." The irony is almost poetic, but it is also sad. All this disaster they did it themselves, and now they are begging me for help. Yes, you read that right. My parents, who snatched everything away from me to give it to Mark, are now constantly calling me to support them in this difficult moment. My mom told me with a voice that sounded like a scolding that I should open another coffee shop, because that is what you are good at, and the family should always help each other. The family should always help each other. That phrase made me laugh out loud. Where was that philosophy when they decided to give my business to Mark? Where was it when they told me that I had already done enough and that I should look for something else that I was passionate about? Of course, I told them no. I reminded them that they themselves decided that Mark was the right one to manage the business. If they want help, they should ask him. I do not know if I was hurt more by the original betrayal or by the nerve they now have to ask me for something after everything they did. As for me, I am in a much better place. My work in the other coffee shop has been a relief in many ways. The owners are kind and value my experience, but beyond that, I am starting to regain my confidence. I have been saving and reflecting a lot about what I want to do in the long term. One thing is for sure, I do not plan to work with my family again. The only thing that worries me is that I do not know how I will handle the constant pressure of their calls and messages. Now they are becoming more insistent, even a little manipulative. My mom cries on the phone saying that they have nowhere else to turn, that they need me. My dad, on the other hand, tries to appeal to guilt, reminding me that they gave me everything when I was young, but I cannot forget what they did. I cannot simply pretend that everything is fine because now they need something from me. Maybe I am selfish, but I do not feel that I owe them anything. Mark is still out of the picture. According to a cousin, he is sleeping on a friend's couch because he broke up with Tiffany. I suppose she realized that he had nothing more to offer her. It is almost funny to think about how my parents sacrificed everything for him, and now he does not lift a finger for them. I think what surprises me the most is how liberating it feels to see how everything falls into place, not because I wanted it, but because finally, everyone is facing the consequences of their own decisions. Update 3. Almost 2 years have passed since this roller coaster began, and what has happened since my last update is something that I never imagined. If I thought I had already seen everything, I was wrong. Things in my family have taken an even more dramatic turn, and this time I have been a direct witness of their complete downfall. First, a quick summary. My parents are in ruin. Literally. After losing the coffee shop, the money, and apparently also their dignity, they have been staggering from crisis to crisis. The last blow was when the bank took their house. I do not know if it is because they used the property as collateral to pay the business debts, or because they stopped paying the mortgage trying to stay afloat, but now they are officially homeless. The news reached me through my aunt, my mom's sister, who is as frustrated with them as I am. According to her, my parents were sleeping in their car for a few days and then tried to move in with her, but their relationship with my aunt has not been precisely good in recent years, and after a few days of putting up with their attitude, she kicked them out. And guess who was the next person they turned to? Exactly me. First, it was a text message from my mom, something vague like, "We need to talk. Things are complicated." I ignored the message because I already knew where this was going. Then came the calls, not one or two, but several a day. At first, I ignored them, but then my dad left me a voicemail where he basically accused me of being ungrateful. "Is this how you treat the family that raised you? We cannot believe that you are turning your back on us in our most difficult moment. We thought you were better than this." That message infuriated me. I did not respond, but hearing it awakened all those feelings of betrayal that I had tried to leave behind. A few days later, they appeared at my apartment without warning. I do not even know how they got my address, but there they were with suitcases and long faces. My mom started crying as soon as I opened the door, saying something like, "We have nowhere to go. Please do not abandon us." I did not know what to do at that moment. Everything was so sudden, so intense that I ended up letting them in. They sat on my couch, my mom whimpering while my dad tried to explain their situation as if it were something that had happened by accident. But what surprised me was that even in that moment, there was no real apology. There was no, "We are sorry for how we treated you," or "We understand that we failed you." Instead of that, my dad said something like, "We know that you are capable. You always have been. If anyone can help us get out of this situation, it is you." Those words chilled me. There I was, once again in their mind, the responsible daughter who can always fix everything, the one who can carry the weight of other people's mistakes. I told them no. I explained that although it hurt me to see them in this situation, I could not take care of them. I reminded them how they betrayed me, how they took everything from me to give it to Mark, and how they did not listen to my warnings when I said that he would ruin everything. I told them that I had spent a lot of time building my independence and that I was not going to sacrifice my stability for them. My mom burst into tears. My dad, on the other hand, became furious. He started shouting that I was being selfish, that the family should always be there to support each other, that they had given me everything when I was a child, and that now it was my turn to return the favor. Finally, I asked them to leave. It was not easy, but I was not going to let them manipulate me. After almost an hour of discussions and pleadings, they finally left. My mom was still crying as she walked down the stairs, and my dad kept mumbling something about how ungrateful I was. Since that day, they have been defaming me with the rest of the family. According to what my aunt told me, my parents are saying that I am an ungrateful daughter who abandoned them in their time of need. But to my surprise, many people in the family are not buying their version. Most already know how they are, and they understand why I made the decision I made. As for Mark, he is still completely disappeared. Nobody knows exactly where he is, but someone mentioned that they saw him working as a waiter in a cheap restaurant. Ironically, it seems that he is finally doing something remotely related to the coffee shop, even if it is involuntarily. For my part, I am moving forward. The work in the local coffee shop has been stable, but I recently received an opportunity that has me excited. An investment partner wants to open a new cafe in the city and offered me the opportunity to manage it. This time, it will be something mine, without interference or family manipulations. Update 4. A year has passed since the last time I wrote, and although at that time I believed that everything was practically resolved, it seems that my story with my family has not ended completely. This last year has been a whirlwind of emotions, new beginnings, and of course, more family drama. I'm going to start with the positive because honestly, I am proud of how things have changed for me. The new cafe that I mentioned in my last update opened its doors 8 months ago and has been a success since day one. I worked hand in hand with the investor to design the concept, the menu, and the aesthetics of the place. We wanted something that felt cozy but modern, a space where people wanted to stay, not just stop by for their quick coffee. When I say that all this has been a labor of love, I am not exaggerating. I was involved in every detail, from selecting the furniture to testing every recipe for the menu. It was exhausting, but seeing how everything came to life was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The opening day was emotional. The community really responded, and several of my former clients from the family coffee shop showed up to support me. Many of them told me that they had missed the warmth and quality that the other place had before everything fell apart, and hearing that filled me with pride, but also with a bit of melancholy. That chapter of my life is still a wound that has not healed completely. Now, what I know that many want to know, what has happened with my family? My parents are in a critical point. Since I kicked them out of my apartment last year, they have been bouncing between the houses of relatives and friends. Nobody seems to want to have them for long, which does not surprise me considering their attitude. My aunt told me that even when they are asking for help, they still maintain this kind of air of superiority, as if the world owed them something. The fact that my parents are in this situation has not changed their narrative about me. Despite everything, they continue telling anyone who wants to listen that I am an ungrateful daughter who abandoned them. But what has surprised me is how that narrative is crumbling little by little. A few months ago, a cousin of mine decided to confront them at a family meeting. I was not there to see it, but they told me that he basically told them that they were reaping what they had sown. According to him, everyone in the family knows how they treated Mark and me, how they took away what I built to give it to my brother, and how their favoritism led them to ruin. My aunt told me that my mom started crying, but not because she was sorry, but because she did not understand how her own family could talk to her like that. My dad, on the other hand, tried to defend himself, saying that they always did what they thought was best for their children, but nobody believed them. And speaking of Mark, he finally reappeared, although in the worst possible way. A couple of weeks ago, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. It was Mark. I had not heard from him since he disappeared after the coffee shop disaster, and honestly, I would have preferred that continued to be the case. The tone of his voice was unusually humble, almost pleading, and the first thing he told me was, "I know you probably do not want to listen to me, but I need your help." It turns out that Mark was in financial trouble. After being fired from several jobs, which is no surprise, he accumulated debts that he could not pay. And now, since he had nowhere else to turn, he decided to look for me. It was a brief conversation because honestly, I had no interest in helping him. I asked him why he thought I would want to do anything for him after everything that had happened. His response was the same old garbage, "Because we are family." I hung up. Since then, I have been receiving text messages from him, some begging and others full of rage accusing me of being selfish and cold. I have not responded to any. I no longer have the energy to deal with him or with his problems. My parents also tried to take his side, calling me to say that I should help my brother because he has always been there for you. That phrase made me laugh. When exactly has Mark been there for me? When he took over the business that I worked for years to build? When he disappeared and left my parents to face the consequences of his decisions? The irony of all this is that despite their constant favoritism towards Mark, they are now so desperate that they have even lost him. He has nothing to offer them, and well, I have no intention of putting myself in the line of fire for them again. Final update. This will be long and heavy, but I need to get it all out. If things already seemed complicated with my family, what happened recently has taken everything to the next level. I never thought that the situation with Mark could get worse. But here we are, with consequences that have left me furious and in a way satisfied in a bitter way. A few weeks ago, I was at home after a long day at the cafe. I was reviewing some papers when I heard a knock on the door. It was late, so I was surprised that someone was knocking. When I opened it, I found two men who I did not recognize. They were big guys with an intimidating look, dressed casually, but with an attitude that immediately put me on alert. The taller of the two spoke first. Without even introducing himself, he asked me, "Are you Mark's sister?" I do not know why I admitted it at that moment, but I said yes. As soon as I did, the other man took a folded paper out of his pocket, unfolded it, and showed it to me. It was a document that looked like some kind of promissory note, and Mark's name was written clearly. They explained to me bluntly that Mark owed them a significant amount of money. According to them, he had gotten involved in bets, first small and then bigger, until he lost more than he could pay. When they tried to collect, Mark apparently told them that he had no money but that his family could cover it. It was then that the shorter of the two added something that chilled my blood. "We know that you run a business. We thought you could help us resolve this little problem." I told them that I had nothing to do with Mark or with his debts, that I had barely seen him in recent years, and that I did not plan to pay a single cent, but they were not interested in my version of the story. One of them even laughed and said, "It is funny because Mark spoke wonders about his responsible sister. He said that you always fix things." I tried to stay calm, but I was shaking. I repeated that I was not going to pay, that they should look for him. It was then that they changed their tone. The taller man looked me directly in the eyes and said, "If you do not pay, we will go look for your parents, and believe me, we are not going to be so kind with them." That was a low blow, not because I felt responsible for my parents, but because I knew that they were not prepared to face something like that. As much as they have hurt and betrayed me, I could not ignore that they were in a vulnerable position. The men gave me a deadline of 1 week to pay. They left the promissory note with me as if that was going to convince me, and left with a warning. "If you decide that it is not your problem, they will be our next visit." During the following days, I could not sleep well, not because I was considering paying, but because I did not know what to do. I knew that Mark was not going to resolve this on his own. I knew that my parents were an easy target, and I knew that if I did not take action, things could end very badly for everyone. Finally, I decided to confront my parents. I called them and told them what had happened. At first, my mom reacted as always, crying and saying that all this was my fault for not helping Mark when he needed it. My dad, on the other hand, tried to minimize the situation, saying that the guys were probably exaggerating to scare me, but when I showed them the promissory note, they fell silent. My dad finally admitted that he knew that Mark had been involved in bets, but he never thought he would go so far. My mom started blaming the bad influences that, according to her, surrounded Mark. I made it clear to them that I was not going to pay for Mark or for them. I told them that it was time for them to face the consequences of their decisions. If they wanted to protect themselves, they had to resolve it themselves. Of course, they did nothing. A week later, the same men returned, but this time not to my door. I found out through my aunt that they had gone to look for my parents. According to what she told me, the men arrived at the small apartment where they were staying, causing a scene in front of the neighbors. My mom begged them to give them more time, but they were not interested in excuses. That night, my dad called my cell phone shouting that all this was my fault, that if I had only paid, none of this would have happened. I hung up. Since then, I have not heard much from them. My aunt says that the men took away what little they had of value and left them a warning that if they did not pay soon, they would return. I do not know if that is true or if my parents are exaggerating to manipulate me, but at this point I no longer care. As for Mark, nobody knows where he is. I suppose he is still running, letting others face the consequences of his irresponsibility. For my part, I am closing this chapter of my life. I have realized that no matter how much I try to get away, my family will always find a way to drag me back into their chaos, and I will allow it no more. This was the last time. Seeing how all this has exploded in their faces does not give me joy, but it does not give me sadness either. It is simply justice. They let Mark be their center, their favorite, their everything, and now they are paying the price for their decisions. I, meanwhile, am moving forward with my life, stronger and more independent than ever. Story 6. My parents surprised me with a family trip for my birthday, but when I came down with my suitcases, I discovered that I was not invited. A few weeks ago, my parents told me that they were planning something special for my 25th birthday. They did not give many details, but they described it as a big surprise and mentioned that it would be something that I would enjoy very much. Naturally, my mind filled with ideas. Maybe it was a surprise dinner, a gift that I had mentioned a long time ago, or even a family trip. After all, we had not done anything significant together in years. I got excited because although our relationship has been somewhat distant lately, I thought that this could be their attempt to reconnect, to show that they cared. In the past, they always put a lot of effort into celebrating birthdays, so I assumed that this year would be no different. The days passed, and my parents continued to leave vague hints about the surprise. My mom said things like, "It is going to be incredible, something that we are all going to remember." My dad added cryptic comments like, "It is something that will mark a before and after." Of course, this only fueled my enthusiasm. Finally, the day arrived. My parents told me to be ready in the morning with my suitcase because we would be leaving early. They did not give me more details, but I assumed that the plan was a family trip, and the idea filled me with joy. I imagined us all together, perhaps in a cabin in the mountains or in some beach destination, so I got up early, filled my suitcase with clothes for all occasions because honestly, I had no idea where we were going, and went down excited to the hall of the house. There were my parents, my older sister, and my younger brother, all ready with their suitcases and smiles on their faces. When I casually asked them what time we were leaving, my mom's smile faded a little. She looked at me with that uncomfortable expression that she puts on when she does not know how to explain something. Finally, she said, "Oh, honey, do not take it the wrong way, but this trip is for us. We thought that maybe you would like to enjoy your birthday quietly at home." I was in shock. "What?" was the only thing I managed to say. "Well, the budget was a bit tight," added my dad as if that explained everything. "And we thought that you were old enough to understand. We wanted to prioritize your siblings because they still need a lot from us." Prioritize my siblings on my birthday? While I was trying to process what I had just heard, they were already closing the door behind them. I stood in the hall with my suitcase to one side, unable to believe what was happening. Now I am here writing this from my room while they are already on their way to the airport. I feel a mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. Am I the problem? Is it normal for them to do something like this? Honestly, I do not know what to think. This is not just about the trip. It is the fact that they did not bother to include me or even let me know beforehand. I feel that they not only excluded me, but made a conscious effort not to include me. Am I a fool for feeling so hurt? I really need to understand if what they did is as insensitive as it seems to me, or if I am exaggerating. Update 1. I have been going over what happened, and I cannot get rid of this feeling. I try to justify their actions, but the more I think about it, the more absurd it seems to me. After all, this is not just any trip. It is something that they supposedly planned for my birthday. How did it occur to them that it would be reasonable to leave me out? During the day, I have been exchanging messages with my older sister. Since we were children, we have always been quite close, and although she now lives in another city and we do not talk as much as before, she is still the person I trust most within my family. I did not expect her to agree with me, but her message left me even more confused. "Sorry, I did not know that you had not been invited until the last moment. I thought that we were all going. That changed everything for me. How is it possible that even she, who was supposedly going on this trip, did not know that they were leaving me out?" According to what she explained to me by message, the conversation about excluding me occurred the day before, just before they left. My parents had not even mentioned that the trip was not for me when they initially planned it. It was something last minute. On the other hand, my younger brother has not said a word. I understand him, I suppose. He has always been more distant and, frankly, a bit selfish. If they give him something, he simply accepts it without questioning it. I do not blame him, But it also hurts me that none of them spoke in my favor. Nobody said, "Hey, maybe this is not the right thing to do." Something that my dad told me a few weeks ago has also been going through my head, but at the time I did not give it much importance. It was during a dinner at home when we were talking about how difficult the cost of living has been lately. He made a comment about how it was time for me to start being more independent and stop expecting things to come to me without effort. At the time, I took it as a generic piece of advice, but now looking back, I wonder if they were already thinking about setting me aside in some way. I have spent most of the day at home in a kind of emotional limbo. I do not feel like doing anything. My room is silent, and every time I go down to the kitchen, I find the absence of any noise or movement. It is strange how something as small as a trip can highlight how isolated I really am within my own family, and then it hits me. This is not just about this trip. This is a pattern. For years I have been the one who always gives in, the one who never causes problems, the one who is there to help with whatever is necessary. When my sister needed help with her move, it was I who carried boxes all day. When my brother had problems with his studies, it was I who helped him prepare for his exams. Even when my parents had financial problems, it was I who put part of my salary to help them. And what do I receive in return? To be treated as if I were expendable. At the end of the day, I decided to call them. My mom answered after the third try. The background noise was intense. Laughter, conversations, the sound of an airport. I tried to stay calm, and I asked her directly why they decided to exclude me. Her response was evasive. She said something like, "Honey, you know that things are complicated, and we thought it would be best for everyone. Do not take it personally. We can celebrate when we get back." When they get back. As if my birthday were something that could be postponed at their convenience. After hanging up, I felt worse, not only because they did not give me a concrete reason, but because it was noticeable that they were not even interested in understanding how I feel. It was as if my anger and my pain were inconveniences for them, something that they prefer to ignore until it disappears, but it is not going to disappear. This feeling of exclusion, of being the last on the list of priorities, does not go away with a simple apology or a compensatory dinner. Something inside me is changing, something that I had never felt before, a mixture of determination and resentment. Maybe this is what I need to open my eyes. Maybe this is the moment to stop being the peacemaker and start defending myself. Update 2. After spending several days at home going over everything that happened, I decided to put aside the pain for a moment and focus on something more concrete. Understand what was really happening, because to be honest, none of this makes sense. Why organize a trip for my birthday and then decide that I would not go? Why leave me completely on the sidelines and also expect me to simply accept it without questioning it? I started with the most obvious: look for answers. For years I have been the type of person who avoids conflicts, who prefers to let things pass instead of facing them. But this time I felt that I could not remain silent. My sister, who had already shown some sympathy towards my situation, seemed to be my only ally, so I sent her a message asking her to have a quick call with me when she had a free moment. It did not take long for her to respond. That night, from her hotel room, she called me. As soon as I answered, the first thing she told me was, "I do not want you to think that I agree with what they did. I did not know that they had left you out until we were already here." I thanked her for her honesty, but I needed more, so I asked her directly if she knew why my parents made that decision. She was silent for a moment, and then with a sigh, she said, "I am not completely sure, but I think it has to do with the house." That word, the house, hit me like a brick. The family house has always been a sensitive issue, although I never thought it would become a problem between us. Since I was little, my parents always told me that one day the house would be mine. Even in casual conversations, they mentioned that I was the one who cared most about keeping it in good condition, that they trusted me to take care of it. "What happens with the house?" I asked, trying not to sound too anxious. My sister hesitated a bit before responding. "I heard Mom and Dad talking with my brother about something related to the house. I do not have all the details, but I think they are planning to transfer the property to him. They said it would be the best for everyone because he needs more support." My heart sank to the floor. How is that the best for everyone? How does he need more support? I have always been the one who has been there for my parents. When the house needed urgent repairs, it was I who put the money and the work to fix it. When there were financial problems, it was I who helped with the maintenance payments. My brother, on the other hand, has barely lifted a finger to contribute. "Are you sure?" I asked, although I already knew that she was not lying. "That is what I heard," she replied. "I did not want to tell you because I know it is going to hurt you, but I think you have the right to know." After hanging up, I felt betrayed. This was not just a trip. It was a meeting to plan something that would affect me directly, and they decided to do it behind my back. They not only physically excluded me from the trip, but they also left me out of an important decision that apparently they had already made. The next day, I decided to look for proof. My parents have an office at home, and although I do not normally enter there without permission, I felt that this situation justified it. I reviewed some documents on my dad's desk, and there they were, papers related to the house. They were drafts of contracts and printed emails with a lawyer. Everything indicated that they were in the process of transferring the property to my brother. I found something that made my blood boil. There was a handwritten note, probably from my dad, that said, "Do this before his name starts to ask." I felt as if someone had slapped me. They were not only plotting this in secret, but they knew perfectly well that I had a legitimate right to question it. Their solution was simply to keep me in ignorance until it was too late to do anything about it. That night, I could not sleep. My mind kept repeating over and over again, "How could they do this to me? I have always been the one who gives in, the one who supports, the one who is there when they need it. And now when the time comes to recognize everything that I have done, they simply decide to ignore me and favor my brother." But among all that anger, something began to change inside me. I realized that I could not continue being the son who accepts everything without protesting. Not anymore. This had gone too far. I decided that I was going to take action. I had been silent for too long, but this time I was going to defend myself. I did not know exactly how, but I was clear that I was not going to let them snatch away what is mine without a fight. Update 3. After discovering the documents in my dad's office, I felt that I had reached a point of no return. It was not just the fact that they planned to transfer the house to my brother. It was the way they were doing it, as if I did not exist, as if my years of effort, sacrifice, and loyalty were worth nothing. The note that said, "Do this before his name starts to ask," kept going through my head. That phrase summarized everything. They had no intention of including me. They did not plan to consult me. And worst of all, they knew that it was wrong. I spent an entire day trying to organize my thoughts. I reviewed every conversation that I had had with my parents in recent years, every promise that they had made to me about the house. I remembered the times that they mentioned that the house will be yours someday because you have always been the one who cares most about it. It was not something ambiguous. They had been clear about it. I also started to remember small moments that at the time did not seem important to me, but that now fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Comments like, "Your brother has to feel supported. He is the youngest," or "You are already an adult. You should think about building something on your own," were always said by my dad. And although at the time I did not see it as something alarming, now it seemed like a preparation to justify what they were doing. I decided that I could not let it pass, but before confronting them directly, I knew that I had to be prepared. I did not want to enter into a discussion based only on emotions. I needed proof and a clear plan. First, I reviewed again the documents that I had found. There were drafts of a property transfer contract, but the most important thing was an email from their lawyer. It said something like, "I recommend proceeding with the signing as soon as possible to avoid any complications with other relatives who may have expectations about the property." That last phrase made it clear to me. They knew that I had expectations about the house, and they were simply ignoring them. I also looked for old messages on my phone. I found several in which my parents thanked me for the repairs that I had made to the house, like when I fixed the roof after a storm or when I paid to replace the boiler because they did not have the money at that time. In one of those messages, my mom even said, "Thank you for everything you do for the house, son. We know it will always be in good hands with you." I saved screenshots of those messages. I also looked for old photos that showed the renovations that I did with my own money and work. I wanted to make sure that I had everything documented. Finally, I gathered my courage and contacted a lawyer. I explained the situation and showed him the evidence that I had, the text messages, the photos, even the handwritten note from my dad. His reaction was clear. "You have a solid case, especially if they made consistent verbal promises and if there is evidence that you invested time and money in the property under the expectation that it would be yours." I felt a mixture of relief and anger upon hearing that. Relief because I had a way to fight, and anger because I knew that deep down my parents were also aware of what they were doing. With that information, I began to plan my next move. I decided that I would not confront them directly yet. I wanted to wait for them to return from the trip and pretend that I knew nothing. I wanted to see how they acted with me, if they intended to mention something to me, or if they continued trying to keep me in ignorance. Meanwhile, I stayed in contact with my sister. She kept sending me messages from the trip, although she seemed uncomfortable with everything that was happening. In one of our conversations, she told me something that made me feel even worse. Mom and Dad mentioned that they think you would not react badly, that you have always been the calm one. I think that is why they were not very worried about leaving you out of this. That phrase, the calm one, made my blood boil. My calmness, my willingness to avoid conflicts, had been misinterpreted as weakness, and they were using it against me. I decided that when they returned, I was not going to be the calm one. I had the evidence, I had the support of a lawyer, and I was ready to face them. I did not care if this meant causing a conflict or altering the family dynamics. I had already reached my limit. I also began to consider more drastic options. If they thought that they could do this without consequences, they were wrong. I was willing to take this as far as necessary. Update 4. 3 days passed since I made the decision to face my parents, and the day of their return finally arrived. I was in the living room when I heard them come in through the door, loaded with suitcases and talking among themselves about how good they had had it on the trip. They barely noticed me. My mom forced a smile and said, "Honey, we are back. How was your birthday? Did you do anything special?" The question made me nauseous. How could she act as if nothing had happened? As if leaving me alone on my birthday had not been one of the most insensitive things they had ever done, but I decided to stay calm. It was not the moment to explode. Not yet. It was quiet. I responded, trying to sound neutral. I did not do much. My dad nodded without even looking at me much. Well, sometimes a little quiet is good, right? He did not even bother to ask how I was feeling or if I needed anything. For them, it seemed that everything was perfectly fine, as if this intentional exclusion was something that I should accept without further ado. I observed them while they arranged their things. My younger brother went straight to his room without saying a word, as always. My sister, on the other hand, gave me a look of support before following them. She knew what was coming, and I think that deep down she hoped that I would finally say something. I did not want to attack them immediately, so I waited for them to finish unpacking and relax in the living room. When everyone was finally seated, I decided that it was time. "Can I ask something?" I said, trying to sound casual. My mom looked at me curiously. "Sure, what's up, son? Why did you organize a trip for my birthday and then decide that I would not go?" The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. My dad frowned. My mom looked uncomfortable, and my younger brother did not even look up from his phone. My sister, on the other hand, crossed her arms and waited in silence, clearly interested in what was going to happen. "Well," began my mom, searching for the words, "do not see it that way. It was not that we excluded you. We just thought it would be better for everyone. And that I did not go." I finished the sentence for her. My dad interjected. "We did not want you to take it personally. It was a practical decision, nothing more." "Practical?" I repeated, feeling how the anger began to rise. What part of planning a trip for my birthday and then leaving me out is practical? "There was not enough budget," responded my dad as if that were a valid excuse. "And we thought that you could understand it better than your siblings." There it was again, that idea that I was the understanding one, the calm one. My dad looked at me as if he expected me to simply accept that answer and move on, but this time it was not going to be like that. "I do not understand," I said, looking directly at my dad. "Especially when I found the papers in your office about the transfer of the house. It seems that there was enough budget for a lawyer." The silence that followed was deafening. My dad looked at me with his eyes wide open, clearly taken by surprise. My mom paled, and my sister looked at the floor, probably because she already knew that this moment was going to arrive. "What papers?" asked my dad finally, although his tone made it clear that he knew exactly what I was talking about. "The documents about transferring the house to my brother," I responded, without looking away, "including a note from you that said, 'Do this before his name starts to ask.'" My mom tried to interject. "Son, it is not what you think." "Then what is it?" I interrupted, this time raising my voice a little. "Because what it seems is that after years of telling me that this house would be mine, you decided to change your mind and do everything behind my back. And then to make sure that I did not find out, you left me out of a family trip to discuss it." My brother finally looked up from his phone and gave me an uncomfortable look, but he did not say anything. As always, he preferred to stay on the sidelines. My dad finally spoke in a defensive tone. We did not want this to become a problem. We thought it would be easier for everyone if we simply did what was best for the family. What was best for the family? I repeated incredulously. And what about everything that I have done for this house? All the time, the money and the effort that I have invested because you told me that it would be mine someday. Does that not count? My mom tried to smooth the situation. Son, you have always been so capable. We know that you can build your own path, but your brother needs more support. This does not mean that we do not value you. We just want to help him in a different way. So you are taking something that you promised me to give it to him? I said, summarizing everything in a single phrase. Nobody responded. The silence in the room said it all. Fine, I said finally, standing up. If that is what you plan to do, I am not going to stay here and accept being trampled on. This does not stay like this. My mom tried to stop me. Please, do not make this bigger than it is. We can talk about it calmly. You already had your opportunity to talk about it with me. I responded, heading towards my room. But you decided to do it behind my back. Now I am going to do things my way. I closed the door of my room and felt a mixture of adrenaline and rage coursing through my body. I knew that I had lit a spark and that this was not going to be easy, but I also knew that I was in my right. Update final. The day after that confrontation, I woke up with a bittersweet feeling. I had done what I had to do, but I also knew that this would mark the beginning of a war within the family. It was not a battle that I could win easily, but I had no intention of giving in. I had the evidence, the legal support, and a determination that I did not plan to abandon. I decided not to do anything during the first days after the confrontation. I knew that my parents would need time to process what had happened, but I also wanted to see if they would try to calm me down in some way, or if on the contrary, they would continue in their posture of ignoring me. During those days, I stayed busy. I did the repairs that I had pending in the house. I would not be surprised if someone thought that I was no longer doing it for them, but to make it clear that I was still the only one who cared about their well-being, and I made sure that they knew. I tried to make it as uncomfortable as possible. The tension in the house was palpable. My brother still avoided talking to me. My mom tried to act as if nothing was happening, and my dad simply ignored me. It was clear that they were not going to apologize, that they were not going to change their minds, and that they were not going to recognize that they had hurt me. About a week later, my sister came to visit me. She seemed tired and worried. She sat next to me in the living room, and without saying anything, hugged me for a long time. I knew that she felt caught in the middle, but I also knew that she wanted to help me in some way. I do not know what to do, she said with a trembling voice. I love you both, but I hate seeing you fight like this. Why can't you just talk about it calmly? This does not have to end this way. I know it is not fair, I said, but maybe this will happen if everyone has a little time to reflect. I responded that I had already given a lot of space for years and that now it was time to act. She did not insist, although I felt that it hurt her to see how all this was affecting the family. Deep down, I understand that her perspective was different from mine. She had always been the older daughter, and although she cared about me, she had never been the center of the family disputes. One afternoon, after my parents returned from work, my dad came to talk to me. His tone was much more serious than before, but even so there was a hint of arrogance in his gaze, as if he expected that everything would be solved with a calm conversation. He sat on the couch, looked at me, and said, "Son, we have been thinking about what you said. We know that it hurt you, and maybe we made wrong decisions, but things are not as simple as they seem." The calmness in his voice made me think that maybe he thought that I would give in, but I would not. "It is not just about what you decided, Dad," I responded, maintaining my calm. "It is about everything that you have told me over the years, about the promises that you made, and about how you acted behind my back." My dad sighed. I know. We told you because we thought that you could handle it better than the others, that you could make your life without depending on this. But we are willing to sit down and talk about it, look for a solution." "A solution?" I repeated, now a little colder. "What solution? What if I am not interested in talking about the house? What if I want you to recognize everything that I have done for you, everything that I have done for this family, and not continue taking it as something that I should do?" My dad's gaze changed slightly, and for a moment it seemed that he understood the gravity of what had happened, but I also knew that he could not go back. I understand what you are saying, he said, this time with a lower tone. But do not think that this has been easy for us. We did what we thought was best. Best for whom? I interrupted, unable to contain myself more. For you, for my brother. What about me? Why does it always have to be me who solves things, the one who helps and never asks for anything in return? My dad did not respond immediately, and for a moment the tension in the room was unbearable. I thought that maybe he was starting to understand the magnitude of what he had done, but then the door of my brother's room opened, and he appeared in the doorway looking at us. Why does all this have to be a problem? He said with his disinterested voice, as if nothing mattered to him in the least. All this is just causing unnecessary drama. It's just a house. Why not let it pass? My blood boiled. That comment, that absolute indifference, was the last straw. I could not take it anymore. They were not only making decisions about the house without consulting me, but now on top of that my brother pretended to minimize the whole matter. It's just a house. I repeated, trying to calm myself. It's just a house for you because you have not done anything for it. But for me it is much more than that. It is my effort, my time, my sacrifice. So no, it is not just a house. My brother raised his hands and walked away. Do what you want. I do not have time for this. You know what? I said, getting to my feet and looking at my dad. I do not care what you say, Dad. I am going to make this matter go beyond here. It is not just about the house. It is about you respecting me, about you understanding what I have done for this family, and if to achieve it I have to take this to court, I will. My dad seemed to be about to say something else, but I cut him off. Enough. If this is the decision you have made, then there is nothing more to say. If you want to fight for this, go ahead. I could not believe what I was hearing, the coldness with which he spoke to me, as if everything that I had done for them did not matter. It was what finally ignited the spark of my revenge. So be it, I said, heading towards the door. We'll see each other in court. When I closed the door behind me, I knew that this was not just a matter of property or money. It was a fight for my dignity, for my right to be treated with respect. It no longer mattered what they thought of me. I had made my decision, and this time I would not remain silent. This chapter of my life would not end until I obtained what belonged to me, and it would not be with empty words or broken promises. It would be with action,